Hey guys, tonight we step into the grimy, bustling streets of 17th century London, where you're a barber wielding razors and leeches in a city thick with plague and soot. Picture yourself in a cramped loft, the air heavy with the smell of damp straw and wood smoke, the distant clang of church bells stirring you awake. You're not just cutting hair, you're pulling teeth, stitching wounds, and dodging disease, all while praying your next client isn't contagious. Honestly, you probably wouldn't survive a day in your own patched apron with no hand sanitizer or antibiotics to save you. But we'll give it a try, right? So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment with your location and local time. I'd love to know where you're drifting off tonight. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You stir gently on a straw pallet, its dry fibers rustling softly beneath you. The coarse texture pricking through the thin wool of your patched shirt. The air in the cramped loft, warm and heavy with the scent of damp wood and the faint sour tang of unwashed linen. Your eyes adjust to the dimness, catching slivers of dawn creeping through gaps in the wooden shutters, their light painting the slanted ceiling in soft greys, the beams blackened by years of soot from the shop's hearth below. The loft is tiny, barely room for you and two apprentices, their pallets empty now, their snores replaced by the faint clatter of pots from the street outside. You're a barber in London's teeming heart, not just trimming beards, but performing surgeries, bloodletting and tooth-pulling, a trade as vital as it is terrifying in a city stalked by plague and filth. You sit up, your breath catching in the chilly air, a faint mist that fades as you rub your eyes. The wool shirt clinging to your shoulders, its patches rough from hasty stitches you sewed last month. You stretch your arms, feeling the stiffness from yesterday's work, shaving a merchant's beard, pulling a sailor's rotten tooth, scrubbing blood from your tools, under the weight of clients' wary glances. The 17th century is brutal London, a maze of muddy streets and crowded tenements where barbers double as surgeons. Their shops a crossroads of grooming and grim medicine, each client a risk of infection or a plea for healing. You chuckle to yourself, imagining explaining this to a modern hairdresser. No clippers, just leeches and luck. Good luck selling that on a salon website. Your first task is to prepare for the day, to shake off the sleep, and ready yourself for the shop's demands, where clients expect sharp razors and steady hands, despite the ever-present shadow of disease. You reach for a small clay jug beside your pallet, its surface cracked but smooth, filled with water from the well you hauled up last night. Its cold bite, a faint shock as you splash your face, the liquid smelling faintly of earth and the Thames' muddy undertow. You wipe it away with the back of your hand, feeling the calluses from gripping scalpels and razors, your fingers more suited to surgery than sewing. You're in your late 20s, but London's work has weathered you. Your skin rough from the city's soot and your trade's demands. You catch yourself wondering if the physicians with their fine robes and Latin books ever wake this early. Probably not, they're too busy penning theories while you face the plague's reality. The pallet rustles as you shift its straw, poking through the shirt, a small annoyance you've learned to ignore, like the fleas that sometimes hitch a ride from clients' cloaks. The loft is sparse, a single wooden chest in the corner, holding your tools, razors, leeches, a bone saw, and a patched apron, its leather stained from countless surgeries. You hear the apprentices downstairs, their voices low as they stoke the hearth, the faint crackle of kindling, a sign the shop is waking. London's barbers are a guild, their trade governed by rules and reputations, but in a city where plague can empty streets overnight, your shop is both a lifeline and a gamble, each client a potential carrier of death. You kneel pulling a pair of worn leather shoes from under the pallet, their soles thin but sturdy, essential for navigating London's muddy alleys. You stand brushing straw from your shirt and move toward the chest, its lid creaking as you lift it, the scent of leather and metal rising from within. You pull out the apron, its weight familiar, like the hemp rope you used in Edo's alleys, a world apart, yet kin in its labor's weight, and tie it around your waist, the leather cool against your shirt. The city's sounds drift through the shutters, cartwheels creaking, a vendor's shout, the distant toll of St. Paul's bell, a pulse that never stops, even in plague times. You wonder, not for the first time, why anyone would risk a shave when a single cut could fester, or why you keep opening your shop despite the fear. You smirk, picturing a modern barber facing this. Sanitized, try, dodging the Black Death, you'd say, amused by their sterile clippers and masks. The dawn light grows stronger, spilling through the gaps, painting the loft in warmer hues, and you hear the apprentice's footsteps on the ladder, a sign the shop's hearth is ready, the day's work about to begin. You take a deep breath, the air thick with straw and the faint, bitter tang of the Thames, a scent that's pure London, as gritty as the city itself. You're ready, or as ready as you'll ever be, to face the shop's chaos, clients' leeches, and the ever-present threat of plague. You think of the modern world with its clean salons and health codes. Would they trade their safety for this? A straw pallet, a rusty razor, and a city where every shave could be your last. You laugh quietly, picturing a barista fumbling a scalpel, their latte art useless in London's grime. You remember the clay jug's cold splash, its bite a faint echo on your skin, and feel the city's rhythm pulling you toward the ladder. Historians still debate whether 17th century London barbers were seen as healers or mere tradesmen, but you don't care much for the debate. The shop is waiting, and that's enough to keep you moving. You take your first step toward the ladder, the air cool against your face. It's time to begin your day. You step down the creaky ladder from the cramped loft, the straw pallets rustle fading behind you, its faint prickle still lingering on your skin as you descend into the dim shop below the morning air, cool against your face, carrying the smoky scent of the newly stoked hearth. Your patched wool shirt shifts with each step, its coarse fabric tied loosely at the waist, and the leather apron, heavy with the stains of yesterday's work, sways against your legs, its weight a quiet reminder of your role as a barber in London's grimy streets. Your bare feet touch the shop's wooden floor, its planks cold and gritty with ash, and you slip on your worn leather shoes, their thin soles creaking as you move toward the hearth's faint glow. The apprentices, their faces smudged with soot, are already at work, one stirring a pot of water, the other stacking kindling, their low voices a soft hum in the shop's stillness. Before the day's clients arrive expecting shaves and surgeries, You must ready your tools, starting with the razors, their blades dulled and rusted from use. You reach for a whetstone, ready to hone the blades in the shop's dim light, the city's dawn stirring outside. The shop is small, its walls blackened by years of hearth smoke, the air thick with the scent of burning wood and the faint metallic tang of old blood from past surgeries, a reminder of the barber's dual trade in grooming and medicine. You settle on a low wooden stool by the hearth, its surface worn smooth, and place the whetstone on a rickety table, its grey surface scarred from countless sharpenings, its weight steady under your hand. You pull a razor from the wooden chest, its iron blade dull and speckled with rust, its wooden handle cracked but familiar, smelling faintly of sweat and the lye soap you used to clean it last. You dip the blade in a clay bowl of water, its surface rippling the liquid cool and murky, and begin to hone, dragging the edge slowly across the stone, the soft scrape a quiet rhythm in the shop's hush. You smile, imagining explaining this to a modern barber. No electric sharpener, just rust and grit. They'd probably grab a disposable razor and run. You work deliberately, your fingers steady the razor's edge, catching the hearth's faint glow as you tilt it, the stone's rough texture grinding away rust and dullness, each pass sharpening the blade for the day's shaves. The apprentices move nearby, one fetching a bucket of coal, the other sweeping ash from the floor, their footsteps soft on the planks, their chatter about a client's bad tooth. A low murmur. The 17th century is unforgiving, London's barbers wielding razors not just for beards, but for lancing boils or cutting flesh. Each shave a gamble in a city where plague sores hide under collars, and a single nick could fester into death. You've sharpened blades before countless times, but each scrape feels like a small act of defiance against the city's filth. A way to keep your hands steady when clients wince or cough. You chuckle softly, picturing a modern surgeon prepping tools. Sterile try, scraping rust by firelight, you think, amused by their autoclaves and gloves. You rinse the blade in the bowl, the water now cloudy with iron flecks, and test its edge with your thumb, the metal cool and sharp, ready to glide over a client's skin without tearing. Though you know a slip could mean more than a bad shave in plague-ridden London. The hearth crackles its warmth, brushing your face, and you feel a bead of sweat on your brow, caught by the shirt's frayed collar, the wool rough against your skin. The shop's air is heavy, the scent of wood smoke now mixed with a faint sour note from a pile of soiled cloths in the corner, waiting to be burned. You move to the next razor, its blade even rustier, and begin again the whetstone scrape, a steady pulse, the apprentices' voices fading as they step outside to fetch water, their buckets clinking faintly in the dawn's haze. You pause to stretch your fingers, the razor's handle warm in your hand, and notice a small spider scuttling across the table. Its legs a blur, a fleeting visitor in the shop's dim light, like the moths you've seen in Edo's guardhouse, a world apart, yet kin in their quiet presence. You flick it away, the wood, smooth under your fingers, and return to the blade, its edge slowly gleaming, a small victory in a trade where every tool must be trusted. The 17th century barber's craft is a strange blend of grooming and surgery, governed by the Barber Surgeons Company, their rules demanding skill but offering no shield against the plague's shadow, a constant threat in London's crowded alleys. You think of the clients you'll face today, merchants, sailors, perhaps a fevered man seeking bloodletting, and wonder if they'll bring news of the pestilence or just a beard to trim. You smirk, picturing a modern doctor facing this. Antibiotics. Try praying the blades clean, you'd say amused by their sterile clinics. The dawn light grows stronger, spilling through the shop's small window, its panes cloudy with grime, painting the walls in soft golds. The hearth's glow fading as the fire dies down. You hear the city waking, cartwheels creaking, a vendor's shout, the distant toll of a church bell, a pulse that drives London's rhythm, even in plague times. You finish the second razor, its edge sharp, and set it beside the first, their blades glinting like small moons, ready for the day's work. Though the rust's faint trace lingers a reminder of the city's decay. You think of the modern world with its stainless steel and sanitizers. Would they trade their tools for this honing rusty blades in a sooty shop plague at the door? You laugh quietly, picturing a barista fumbling a razor, their latte art useless in London's grime. You remember the clay jug's cold splash from the loft, its bite a faint echo on your skin, and feel the shop's rhythm pulling you toward the next task. Historians still debate whether 17th century London barbers sharpened blades for precision or to avoid infection, but you don't care much for the debate. The razors are sharp, and that's enough to keep you moving. You stand brushing ash from your apron, the shop's dim light, fading ready for the next duty, London's streets, waiting beyond the window's grime. You step back from the rickety table, the sharpened razors now gleaming faintly on its scarred surface, their rusty edges honed to a fine point, ready for the day's shaves in your dim sooty shop. Your patched wool shirt brushes your waist, its coarse fabric tied loosely under the stained leather apron, its weight a quiet reminder of your role as a barber, not just trimming beards, but tending wounds and bloodletting in London's plague-ridden streets. Your worn leather shoes creak on the wooden floor, their thin soles gritty with ash from the hearth, its embers still crackling softly, casting a warm glow across the shop's blackened walls. The apprentices, their faces smudged with soot, are outside fetching water, their buckets clinking faintly, leaving the shop quiet, save for the distant hum of London's waking streets. Cartwheels creaking, a vendor's shout. Before the first clients arrive expecting relief from fevers or sores, you must prepare a leech salve, a sticky mix to soothe the skin after bloodletting, and gather the wriggling creatures from a clay jar. You move to a small shelf ready to stir the salve, the shop's dim light guiding your hands. The shelf is a narrow plank, its wood warped from years of damp holding clay jars, a pestle and mortar and a chipped bowl filled with herbs, their musty scent mingling with the shop's wood smoke and the faint metallic tang of old blood. You take a clay jar, its surface cool and smooth, sealed with a cork stopper, and set it on the table, its contents dozens of leeches slithering softly, their wet bodies brushing the clay, a sound like faint rain. You lift a wooden bowl, its interior stained from past salves, and begin to mix crumbling dried comfrey leaves, their green flakes dusty and bitter, into a small pile of rendered goose fat, its greasy scent sharp in the morning air. You stir with a wooden spoon, its handle worn smooth, the mixture thickening into a pale, sticky paste, a salve to calm the red welts left by leeches' bites. You smile, imagining explaining this to a modern pharmacist. No cream, just fat and worms. They'd probably grab a tube of ointment and faint. You work slowly, your hands steady the spoon's soft scrape, blending with the hearth's faint crackle. The salve's texture smooth but lumpy, its comfrey scent earthy, a quiet promise of relief for clients who trust your leeches to balance their humours. The apprentices return their buckets sloshing, and one Tom the younger, with a freckled face, peers at the jar, wrinkling his nose at the leech's wriggle, muttering about their slime. You grin, recalling your own squeamish days, and keep stirring the bowl cool under your fingers, the fat melting into the herbs, a ritual as old as London's barber surgeons, who blend grooming with medicine in a city where plague lurks in every cough. The 17th century is grim bloodletting a common cure for fevers, headaches, or even melancholy, though you've seen clients faint from the leech's slow suck, their faces pale as the shop's dawn light. You chuckle softly, picturing a modern doctor prescribing this. Take 2 leeches and call me, nope, try antibiotics. You think amused by their sterile syringes and charts. You set the spoon down the salve ready, its surface glistening in the hearth's glow, and uncork the leech jar. The stoppers faint pop sharp in the shop's quiet, the creatures' slimy bodies shifting, their dark forms glinting like wet coal. You reach in your fingers, brushing their cool, slick skin, and lift a few, their wriggling ticklish, against your palm, placing them in a smaller clay pot, its rim chipped but clean for easy access when clients arrive. The leeches are vital, their bites a barber's tool as much as razors or scalpels. Though their care, keeping them moist, feeding them blood, feels like tending a strange living pharmacy. You've handled leeches before countless times, but their slimy dance still makes your skin prickle, a quiet unease in a trade where every client could carry the plague. You think of the Edo Doshin, their ropes binding thieves a world apart, yet kin in their labor's weight, both facing tasks that test the nerves. You cork the jar, its contents still slithering, and wipe your hands on the apron, its leather rough a faint smear of salve, joining the stains of blood and lye. The shop's air is heavy, the scent of comfrey now mixed with a faint sour note from the leeches, their jar a quiet menace on the shelf. You notice a small spider weaving a web in the corner, its delicate threads catching the dawn light, a fleeting craftsman in the shop's dimness, like the moths you've seen in Edo's guardhouse, a world apart, yet kin in their silent work. You've heard London's old women talk of spiders as omens of wealth, but you're not one for superstitions, just a barber, your mind on the salve, and the clients it'll soothe. The apprentices chatter, Tom joking about a client who screamed when a leech fell on his shoe, and you grin, the shop's rhythm, a quiet pulse urging you toward the day's work. The morning light grows stronger, spilling through the window's cloudy panes, painting the floor in soft golds, the hearth's embers fading as the shop warms. You hear the city's pulse vendors shouting, a church bell tolling the creak of a cart, a reminder of London's life even in plague times. You set the salve bowl beside the leech pot, their contents ready, and feel a faint ache in your fingers from stirring and sharpening the day's labor already settling in. You think of the modern world with its pharmacies and sterile tools. Would they trade their safety for this mixing salve in a sooty shop, leeches wriggling nearby? You laugh quietly, picturing a barista handling a leech, their latte art useless in London's grime. You remember the razors, you sharpened their edges gleaming, and feel the shop's rhythm pulling you toward the next task, the city's streets, waiting beyond the window. Historians still debate whether 17th century London barbers used leeches for healing or humouring outdated theories, but you don't care much for the debate. The salve is mixed, and that's enough to keep you moving. You step toward the hearth, the shop's dim light steady, ready for the next duty, London's clients waiting with their ailments and fears. You step back from the hearth, the wooden bowl of leech salve, now resting beside the clay pot of wriggling leeches, their slimy forms quiet in the shop's dim light, the comfrey's earthy scent lingering on your fingers like a faint echo of your morning's work. Your patched wool shirt brushes your waist, its coarse fabric tied loosely under the stained leather apron, its weight a quiet reminder of your role as a barber shaving beards and tending ailments in London's plague-shadowed streets. Your worn leather shoes creak on the wooden floor, their thin soles gritty with ash, and the hearth's embers glow softly, casting flickering shadows across the shop's blackened walls, the air thick with wood smoke and the faint metallic tang of sharpened razors. The apprentices Tom and Will are hauling buckets of water, their footsteps fading outside, leaving the shop still save for the distant hum of London's streets vendors calling, cartwheels creaking. Before the first clients arrive expecting sharp shaves or bloodletting, you must tidy the shop, clearing the sooty floor of ash and hair clippings. You grab a straw broom from a corner, ready to sweep the shop's quiet, guiding your hands. The broom is old, its straw bristles bound with twine, their ends frayed but stiff. The wooden handle worn smooth by years of use, smelling faintly of dust and the shop's ever-present soot. You begin to sweep, your movements slow and deliberate, the bristles gliding across the wooden floor, gathering a small pile of ash from the hearth. Its grey flecks, fine but gritty, mixed with clumps of dark hair clipped from yesterday's clients, a merchant's beard, a sailor's matted locks. The floor is uneven, its planks warped from damp and wear, and you feel the broom's resistance, the straw catching faintly on a splintered board, the soft rustle, a quiet rhythm in the shop's hush. You smile, imagining explaining this to a modern salon worker. No vacuum, just straw and soot. They'd probably grab a Swiffer and a face mask. You work steadily, your hands gripping the broom's handle. The wood cool under your calloused palms, pushing the pile toward the door, the ash swirling faintly in the dawn light, spilling through the shop's cloudy window. The apprentices return their buckets sloshing, and Tom, his freckled face flush, trips over a plank splashing water that darkens the floor, muttering about a client who fainted during a tooth pull. You grin the boy's clumsiness, a spark in the morning's calm, and keep sweeping the broom's bristles, gathering more hair, its strands tangled with bits of dried blood from a lancing. You performed a grim reminder of your trade's dual role in grooming and surgery. The 17th century is harsh, London's barbers working in shops thick with filth, where a clean floor is a small defense against the plague's creep. Each speck of dust, a potential carrier of death. You chuckle softly, picturing a modern hygienist in this shop. Sanitized, try sweeping plague dust, you think amused by their bleach and gloves. You guide the broom along the wall, its blackened boards gleaming faintly, and sweep under a low bench, its surface scarred from years of clients' boots, gathering a small pile of soot and straw, the debris a quiet record of the shop's life. The air is heavy, the scent of wood smoke now mixed with a faint sour note from a bucket of soiled cloths in the corner, their stains waiting for the fire's cleansing. You feel a bead of sweat on your brow, caught by the shirt's frayed collar, and pause to stretch your back, the ache from sharpening razors and mixing salve settling into your muscles, a steady weight in a trade that never pauses. The shop's window rattles in a faint breeze, its panes cloudy with grime, and you hear a vendor's shout outside, selling pies, his voice sharp against the city's waking pulse. Church bells, tolling hooves, clopping a dog's bark. You sweep the pile toward the door, the bristles brushing the planks, and notice a small beetle scuttling across the floor, its black shell glinting in the hearth's light, a fleeting visitor in the shop's dimness. Like the spiders you've seen weaving webs in the loft a world apart, yet kin in their silent presence. You nudge it aside with the broom, its legs a blur, and keep sweeping the pile, growing a mix of ash hair and dust that tells the story of your work-shave surgeries, the constant fight against London's filth. The 17th century barber's shop is a battleground where cleanliness is a ritual as vital as bloodletting. Though no amount of sweeping can banish the plague's threat, a spectre that haunts every client's cough or fevered glance. You think of the clients you'll face today, perhaps a merchant needing a shave, or a man seeking leeches for a fever, and wonder if they'll bring news of the pestilence or just a beard to trim. You smirk, picturing a modern cleaner facing this floor. Hazmat suit, try an apron, and hope you'd say amused by their sterile tools and sprays. You gather the debris into a small clay dish, its surface cracked but smooth, and carry it to the door, scattering it into the alley, the ash vanishing into the dirt. The morning light painting the street in soft golds, the city's pulse, a quiet drumbeat, vendors' carts' bells. You set the broom back in its corner, its handle leaning against the wall, and adjust your apron, brushing a speck of ash from the leather. It stains a map of your trade, like the ink smudges on the Edo Doshin's sleeve, a world apart, yet kin in their labour's marks. The shop is cleaner now, the floor's grit gone, though the air still holds the hearth's smoke, and the leech's sour tang a reminder of the day's work ahead. You think of the modern world, with its salons and vacuums. Would they trade their tools for this sweeping soot in a plague-ridden shop, death in every dust mote? You laugh quietly, picturing a barista wielding a broom, their latte art useless in London's grime. You remember the leech salve, its sticky weight on your fingers, and feel the shop's rhythm pulling you toward the next task. Historians still debate whether 17th century London barbers swept floors for hygiene or appearance. But you don't care much for the debate. The floor is clean, and that's enough to keep you moving. You step toward the table, the shop's dim light steady, ready for the first client, London's streets, waiting beyond the door's quiet threshold. You step away from the table, the straw broom now resting in its corner, the shop's wooden floor swept clean of ash and hair clippings. its planks gleaming faintly in the morning light filtering through the cloudy window. Your patched wool shirt brushes your waist, its coarse fabric tied under the stained leather apron, its weight a quiet reminder of your role as a barber, shaving beards and tending ailments in London's plague-shadowed streets. Your worn leather shoes creak on the floor, their thin soles free of the grit you swept away, and the hearth's embers glow softly, their warmth fading as the shop stirs with the day's rhythm. The apprentices Tom and Will are setting out tools, razor's leech pot salve bowl, their clinking, a soft hum against the city's waking sounds. Outside vendors shouting cartwheels, creaking a church bell's toll. Your first client of the day, a nervous merchant seeking a shave, is due soon, and you must greet him, calming his fears of your blade or the plague's lurking threat. You move toward the shop's door, ready to welcome him, the morning's quiet guiding your steps. The door is a heavy wooden slab, its surface scarred from years of use creaking. As you pull it open, the cool morning air rushing in, carrying the scent of mud and grilled fish from the alley, a sharp contrast to the shop's wood smoke and leech tang. You stand in the doorway, your apron swaying faintly, its leather cool against your shirt, and adjust your wool cap, its faded russet cloth snug on your head, a small shield against the city's damp. The alley is narrow, its dirt path churned by carts and feet, lined with timbered houses, leaning close their shutters, just opening to the dawn. A man approaches a merchant in a russet cloak, his face pale and eyes darting his steps, hesitant as he nears his hand, clutching a small coin pouch, wary of the shop's reputation for surgery and plague risks. You nod, your voice low and steady, offering a calm greeting, gesturing him inside with a gentle wave, your smile practiced to ease his nerves. You smile, imagining explaining this to a modern salon worker. No booking app, just a nervous guy and vibes. They'd probably text a cancellation and bolt. You lead him inside your shoes, creaking on the planks. The shop's dim light wrapping around you, the hearth's faint glow casting soft shadows on the walls. Their blackened wood, a quiet backdrop to the merchant's unease. He pauses by the door, his cloak brushing the floor, his breath shallow, and you gesture to a wooden stool by the table, its surface worn smooth, inviting him to sit, your voice soft, as you ask about his shave, steering his mind from the leeches or scalpels on the shelf. His eyes flick to the clay pot, its leeches wriggling faintly, and you chuckle gently, assuring him it's just a shave today. No bloodletting, though you know a single nick could fester in London's filthy air. The 17th century is perilous, barbers like you, balancing grooming and medicine, each client a gamble in a city where plague sores hide under cloaks, and every cough sparks fear. You chuckle softly, picturing a modern client in this shop. Health waiver. Try praying you don't catch death, you think, amused by their sanitized chairs and masks. You adjust your apron, its leather catching on your shirt, and pull a clean linen cloth from a shelf, its fibers rough but free of stains, draping it over the merchant's shoulders. Its weight a quiet reassurance, though his hands fidget, his coin pouch clinking faintly. The shop's air is heavy, the scent of wood smoke, now mixed with a faint sour note from the leech pot, and you feel a bead of sweat on your brow, caught by the cap's russet brim, the morning's warmth creeping in despite the open door. The apprentices hover nearby, Tom polishing a razor will, stacking, kindling their movements, soft their eyes on the merchant, curious but silent, knowing a nervous client needs calm, not chatter. You speak slowly, asking about his trade spices. He says, his voice tight, drawing his focus from the blade. You'll soon wield a ritual to steady both him and you in a trade where trust is as sharp as a razor. You notice a small sparrow perched on the window's ledge, its chirp a bright note in the shop's quiet, a fleeting visitor like the beetle you nudged, while sweeping a world apart, yet kin in their small lives like the moths in Edo's guardhouse. You recall the old women's tales of sparrows as signs of hope, but you're not one for omens, just a barber, your mind on the merchant and the shave to come. The city's pulse drifts through the door vendors, bells, the clop of hooves, a reminder of London's life even in plague times. Your hands are steady, though you feel a faint ache in your fingers from sharpening and mixing. Salve the day's labor, a quiet weight. Like the Sahara's salt workers, slabs a world apart, yet kin in their toil's burden. You think of the clients you'll face today, merchants, sailors, perhaps a fevered man, and wonder if they'll bring news of the pestilence or just a beard to trim. The merchant relaxes slightly, his shoulders easing under the cloth, and you nod, your voice low, promising a smooth shave, though you know the plague's shadow looms. A cut could fester, a cough could kill. You adjust the cloth, its linen soft, and step back ready to fetch the razor, its edge gleaming on the table, the shop's rhythm a quiet pulse urging you toward the day's work. You think of the modern world with its sterile salons and safety rules. Would they trade their clinics for this greeting, a nervous client in a sooty shop plague at the door? You laugh quietly, picturing a barista calming a client, their latte art useless in London's grime. You remember the leech salve, its sticky weight, a faint echo on your fingers, and feel the city's rhythm pulling you toward the shave, the shop's door open to the alley's dawn. Historians still debate whether 17th century London barbers soothed clients for trust or profit, but you don't care much for the debate. The merchant is seated, and that's enough to keep you moving. You turn toward the table, the shop's dim light steady, ready for the shave, London's clients, waiting beyond the alley's quiet haze. You step back from the merchant, his russet cloak now settled on the wooden stool, the linen cloth draped over his shoulders, its rough fibers a quiet shield as he sits in your dim shop, his nervous fidgeting eased by your calm words about his spice trade. Your patched wool shirt brushes your waist, its coarse fabric tied under the stained leather apron, its weight a quiet reminder of your role as a barber, not just grooming, but risking plague with every client in London's grimy streets. Your worn leather shoes creak on the wooden floor, their thin soles free of the ash you swept earlier, and the hearth's embers glow faintly, casting soft shadows across the shop's blackened walls. The air thick with wood smoke and the faint, sour tang of the leach pot nearby. The apprentices Tom and Will hover in the corner, one polishing a scalpel, the other stacking, kindling their soft chatter about a client's bad tooth, fading as you prepare to shave. You reach for a sharpened razor, ready to shave the merchant's beard, your hands trembling slightly, wary of plague-ridden sores hidden beneath his stubble, the shop's morning light guiding your careful strokes. You lift the razor from the table, its iron blade glinting in the dawn light, spilling through the cloudy window, its wooden handle cool and cracked in your palm, the metal's faint metallic scent mingling with the shop's wood smoke and the leech salve's earthy tang. You approach the merchant, his face pale but steady, his eyes fixed on the razor, a flicker of fear betraying his earlier calm, his breath shallow as he grips the stool's edge. You dip a small linen cloth in a clay bowl of warm water, its surface steaming faintly, the liquid's earthy smell a trace of the Thames's silt, and press it to his beard, softening the coarse stubble, the cloth's warmth drawing a small sigh from him, though his hands still fidget his coin pouch, clinking softly. You smile, your voice low and soothing, murmuring about the weather, misty as London mornings often are to ease his nerves, though your own hands tremble, the razor's weight a quiet threat, in a city where a single nick could invite infection. You smile, imagining explaining this to a modern barber. No clippers, just plague and prayers. They'd probably sterilize the room and quit. You begin to shave your hands, moving slowly, deliberately, the razor's edge gliding over the merchant's cheek, its soft scrape a quiet rhythm in the shop's hush, each stroke peeling away stubble, revealing pale skin beneath your eyes, scanning for the telltale red sores of plague hidden in the beard's shadow. The merchant's breath catches his eyes darting to yours, and you pause, wiping the blade on the cloth, its linen now speckled with hair, ensuring no cut mars his skin, no blood beads to mingle with the city's filth. The 17th century is perilous London's barbers wielding razors in shops thick with disease, where a shave is as much a medical act as a haircut, each client a gamble in a city where plague can spread from a single touch. You've shaved clients before their faces a blur of fear or trust, but each stroke feels like a dance with death, your trembling hands a quiet battle against the unseen. You chuckle softly, picturing a modern surgeon in this shop. Infection control. Try holding your breath, you think, amused by their gowns and gloves. You tilt the merchant's chin, your fingers steady, despite the tremble, feeling the rough stubble under your thumb, and guide the razor along his jaw, its edge sharp from your morning's honing, the blade gliding smoothly, though your heart quickens, wary of a hidden sore, a plague mark that could doom you both. The shop's air is heavy, the scent of wood smoke now mixed with a faint soapy note. From the lather you spread, its lie sting faint, but sharp, a reminder of the shop's grime. The apprentices watch Tom's freckled face, curious Will's eyes on the scalpel. He polishes their silence, a quiet respect for the shave's danger, knowing a mistake could close the shop if plague follows. You wipe the blade again, the cloth's texture rough, and continue the razor's scrape, blending with the hearth's faint crackle. The city's pulse outside, vendors' bells, hooves a distant hum in the morning's calm. You finish one cheek, the skin smooth and unblemished, and move to the other, your hands steadier now, though the tremble lingers, a quiet echo of the plague's ever-present threat, like the leeches wriggling in their pot, a world apart, yet kin in their menace, like the ropes binding Edo's thieves. The merchant relaxes slightly, his shoulders easing, and you murmur about his trade cinnamon from the docks. He says, his voice less tight, a distraction to keep him still, though you know a single cough could change everything. You notice a small moth fluttering near the window, its wings a pale blur in the dawn light, a fleeting visitor like the sparrows in Edo's squares. a world apart, yet kin in their small lives, and you recall the old women's tales of moths as omens. Though you're not one for signs, just a barber, your mind on the razor and the merchant's beard. Your muscles ache the morning's sharpening, mixing and sweeping a steady weight, but the shave's rhythm soothes it, a quiet focus in London's chaos. You adjust the cloth, its linen catching on the merchant's cloak, and wipe a stray lather fleck from his chin, the razor's edge gleaming ready for the final strokes. The air grows warmer, the dawn light spilling stronger through the window, and you hear a vendor's shout selling pies, a reminder of the city's life even in plague times. You think of the modern world with its electric razors and antiseptics. Would they trade their safety for this shaving with trembling hands, plague sores a hidden threat? You laugh quietly, picturing a barista wielding a rusty razor, their latte art useless in London's grime. You remember the leech salve, its sticky weight a faint echo on your fingers, and feel the shop's rhythm pulling you toward the shave's end, the next task waiting beyond the merchant's steady breaths. Historians still debate whether 17th century London barbers shaved with care to avoid infection or to build trust, but you don't care much for the debate. The blade is sharp, and that's enough to keep you moving. You finish the final stroke, the merchant's beard gone, and step back ready to wipe the blade, the shop's dim light steady. London's clients waiting beyond the alley's quiet haze. You step back from the merchant, his freshly shaved face, now smooth, the linen cloth slipping from his shoulders as he rises from the wooden stool, his russet cloak catching the morning light, filtering through the shop's cloudy window. Your patched wool shirt brushes your waist, its coarse fabric tied under the stained leather apron, its weight a quiet reminder of your role as a barber, not just shaving beards, but performing grim surgeries in London's plague-ridden streets. Your worn leather shoes creak on the wooden floor, their thin soles free of the ash you swept earlier, and the hearth's embers glow faintly, their warmth fading as the shop hums with the day's rhythm. The apprentices Tom and Will are tidying tools, razors, leech pot, salve, bowl, their clinking a soft hum against the city's sounds, outside vendors shouting, cartwheels creaking. Your next client, a sailor with a swollen jaw, waits by the door, his groans low and pained, clutching his cheek, needing a rotten tooth pulled. You move toward him, ready to extract the tooth, grimacing at his pained sounds, the shop's dim light guiding your careful hands. You gesture to the stool, your voice low and steady, inviting the sailor to sit, his weathered face flushed with pain, his salt-crusted cloak smelling of sea and sweat, his eyes wary but desperate for relief. He eases onto the stool, its wood creaking under his weight, and you adjust your apron, its leather cool against your shirt, ensuring it won't catch on your tools. You fetch a small iron tooth key from the wooden chest, its curved handle heavy, its claw-like tip designed to grip and twist, its metallic tang sharp in the shop's air, mingling with wood smoke and the faint sour note of the leech pot nearby. You hold the key, its weight a quiet threat, and lean close, your fingers probing the sailor's jaw, feeling the swollen heat of his gum, his groan deep and raw as you touch the rotten tooth, its black decay stark against his yellowed teeth. You smile, imagining explaining this to a modern dentist. No Novocaine, just a hook and grit. they'd probably grab a drill and pass out. You work slowly, your hands steady, despite the sailor's groans. His breath hot and sour, his eyes squeezing shut as you position the key, its claw slipping around the tooth, the iron cold against his gum. You twist gently, feeling the tooth's resistance, its roots stubborn in the swollen flesh, and pause, wiping sweat from your brow with the back of your hand. The wool shirt's collar rough against your skin. The 17th century is brutal. London's barbers, doubling as surgeons, pulling teeth in shops thick with filth, where a bad extraction could lead to infection, or worse, spread plague if the client's sores go unnoticed. You've pulled teeth before their cracks and groans a routine part of your trade, but each tug feels like a gamble. The sailor's pain, a mirror to the city's suffering. You chuckle softly, picturing a modern patient in this shop. Root canal. Try a yank and a prayer, you think, amused by their numbing gels and x-rays. You twist again, the key's iron creaking faintly, and the tooth gives a soft pop as it pulls free. The sailor's groan sharp, his hand gripping the stool, blood welling in his mouth, its coppery scent sharp in the shop's air. You drop the tooth into a clay bowl, its blackened form small but heavy, and press a clean linen cloth to his gum. Its fibers rough but absorbent. The sailor's breath slowing as the pain ebbs his eyes, opening a mix of relief and exhaustion. The shop's air is heavy, the scent of blood now mixing with wood smoke, and the leech pot's sour tang, and you feel a faint tremble in your hands. The key's weight, lingering, a quiet reminder of the plague's ever-present threat, like the sores you feared under the merchant's beard. The apprentices watch Tom's freckled face pale, Will's eyes wide, their silence a quiet awe at the extraction's grim success. You wipe the key on the cloth, its iron now smeared with blood, and set it aside, ready to clean later, the bowl's bloody tooth a small trophy in the shop's dim light. The sailor mumbles, thanks, his voice thick, and you nod your voice low, suggesting he rinse with ale to dull the pain, a common remedy in a city where clean water is scarce. The morning light spills stronger through the window, painting the floor in soft golds, and you hear the city's pulse vendors, bells' hooves, a reminder of London's life, even in plague times. Your muscles ache, the day's sharpening, mixing, sweeping and shaving a steady weight, but the extraction's rhythm soothes it, a quiet focus in the shop's chaos. You think of the Edo Doshin, their ropes binding thieves a world apart, yet kin in their labor's weight, both facing tasks that test the nerves. You notice a small dragonfly hovering near the window. Its wings a blur in the dawn's light, a fleeting visitor like the sparrow you saw earlier. A world apart, yet kin in their small lives, and you recall the old men's tales of dragonflies as harbingers of change. Though you're not one for omens, just a barber, your mind on the sailor and the tooth now gone. The air grows warmer, the hearth's embers fading, and you catch a faint whiff of grilled fish from the alley, a savory note in the shop's gritty scent. You think of the modern world with its dental clinics and anesthetics. Would they trade their tools for this pulling teeth with a rusty key plague in every groan? You laugh quietly, picturing a barista facing a tooth pull, their latte art useless in London's grime. You remember the merchant's shave, its trembling strokes, a faint echo in your hands, and feel the shop's rhythm pulling you toward the next task, the city's clients waiting beyond the alley's quiet haze, Historians still debate whether 17th century London barbers pulled teeth for health or profit, but you don't care much for the debate. The tooth is out, and that's enough to keep you moving. You help the sailor rise the shop's dim light steady, ready for the next duty, London's streets humming outside the door. You step back from the sailor, his swollen jaw now eased, the rotten tooth resting in the clay bowl, its blackened form a small relic of the morning's grim work, his salt-crusted cloak swaying as he rises from the wooden stool, mumbling thanks through a bloodied cloth pressed to his gum. Your patched wool shirt brushes your waist, its coarse fabric tied under the stained leather apron, its weight a quiet reminder of your role as a barber, shaving beards and pulling teeth in London's plague-shadowed streets. Your worn leather shoes creak on the wooden floor, their thin soles catching a faint trace of ash, and the hearth's embers glow faintly, their warmth barely touching the shop's dim air, thick with wood smoke and the sharp, coppery scent of blood. The apprentices Tom and Will are wiping down the table, their movements quick but quiet, their chatter about the sailor's groans fading as they glance at the leech pot, its wriggling contents a silent menace. Your next task is to clean the bloody instrument scalpels, tooth key razors used in the day's surgeries, washing away the stains to ready them for tomorrow's clients. You move to a clay basin by the hearth, ready to scrub the shop's morning light, guiding your careful hands. The basin is wide and shallow, its clay surface cracked, but smooth, filled with water hauled from the well, its murky depths cool and tinged with the Thames' earthy scent. A faint ripple catching the light from the shop's cloudy window. You gather the instruments from the table, the tooth key's iron claw smeared with blood, the razor's blade speckled with lather and stubble, a small scalpel used to lance a boil yesterday, crusted with dried red. You set them beside the basin, their metal glinting faintly, the blood's coppery tang sharp in the air, mingling with the wood smoke and the faint sour note of the leech salve nearby. You dip a linen cloth into the water, its fibers rough but clean, and begin to scrub the tooth key, the cloth gliding over the iron, washing away the blood in soft red swirls. You smile, imagining explaining this to a modern surgeon. No autoclave, just a rag and hope. They'd probably sterilize the room and run. You work slowly, your hands steady the cloth's damp texture, cool against your fingers. The key's iron rough under the pressure, its blood dissolving into the water, the basin's surface now cloudy with faint red streaks. The apprentices hover nearby, Tom fetching a bucket of coal, Will stacking kindling, their footsteps soft on the planks, their eyes darting to the basin, wary of the blood's silent threat, knowing plague could hide in a single drop. The 17th century is unforgiving, London's barbers cleaning tools in shops thick with filth, where a dirty blade could spread infection, turning a shave or surgery into a death sentence. You've cleaned instruments before, their stains a routine part of your trade, but each scrub feels like a quiet battle against the city's decay, a way to keep your shop safe, though no cloth can banish the plague's shadow. You chuckle softly, picturing a modern hygienist facing this. Sanitized, try-scrubbing plague blood, you think amused by their bleach sprays and disposable tools. You rinse the cloth, wringing it over the basin, the water dripping in soft patters And move to the scalpel, its blade small but sharp. The dried blood flaking under the cloth's pressure, the metal gleaming as you scrub its edge, a quiet promise for the next surgery. The shop's air is heavy, the scent of blood now mixing with a faint soapy note from the lye you add to the water, its sting faint but sharp, a reminder of the shop's grime. You feel a bead of sweat on your brow, caught by the wool cap's russet brim, and pause to stretch your fingers, the ache from sharpening razors mixing salve, sweeping and pulling teeth, settling into your hands, a steady weight in a trade that never pauses. The morning light spills stronger through the window, painting the floor in soft golds, and you hear the city's pulse vendors shouting bells, tolling hooves, clopping a reminder of London's life even in plague times. You notice a small beetle scuttling across the table, its black shell glinting in the hearth's light. A fleeting visitor like the dragonfly you saw earlier, a world apart, yet kin in their small lives like the sparrows in Edo's squares. You nudge it aside with the cloth, its legs a blur, and keep scrubbing the razor, now clean its blade, shining ready for the next shave. Though the blood's faint trace lingers a reminder of the sailor's tooth and the merchant's beard. The 17th century barber's shop is a crucible where cleanliness is a ritual as vital as bloodletting. Though no amount of scrubbing can erase the plague's threat, a spectre in every client's breath. You think of the clients you'll face today, perhaps a sailor needing a boil lanced or a man seeking leeches, and wonder if they'll bring news of the pestilence or just a wound to stitch. You smirk, picturing a modern cleaner facing this basin. Biohazard try, dodging the Black Death, you'd say, amused by their hazmat suits and protocols. You finish the scalpel, its metal gleaming, and set it beside the key and razor, their surfaces clean, ready for tomorrow's work. Though the basin's water is now murky, a quiet record of the day's surgeries. You empty it into a bucket, the liquid sloshing, and wipe your hands on the apron, its leather rough a faint smear of blood joining the stains, like the ink smudges on the Edo Doshin's sleeve, a world apart, yet kin in their labour's marks. The shop's rhythm is slow, the apprentice's chatter returning. Tom joking about a client's scream, Will muttering about the leeches, and you feel London's pulse pulling you toward the next task, the city's clients waiting beyond the alley's quiet haze. You think of the modern world with its sterile tools and clinics. Would they trade their safety for this scrubbing bloody blades in a sooty shop plague in every drop? You laugh quietly, picturing a barista cleaning a scalpel, their latte art useless in London's grime. You remember the sailor's tooth, its blackened form in the bowl, and feel the shop's rhythm urging you forward. Historians still debate whether 17th century London barbers cleaned tools to prevent infection or maintain appearances. But you don't care much for the debate. The instruments are clean, and that's enough to keep you moving. You step toward the hearth, the shop's dim light steady, ready for the next duty, London's streets humming outside the door. You step away from the clay basin, the bloody instrument scalpels, tooth key razors now scrubbed clean, their polished surfaces glinting faintly on the scarred table, free of the day's surgical stains, ready for tomorrow's clients in your dim sooty shop. Your patched wool shirt brushes your waist, its coarse fabric tied loosely under the stained leather apron, its weight a quiet reminder of your role as a barber, shaving beards and pulling teeth in London's plague-shadowed streets. Your worn leather shoes creak on the wooden floor, their thin soles catching a faint trace of ash, and the hearth's embers glow softly, their warmth barely touching the shop's air, thick with wood smoke and the faint sour tang of the leach pot nearby. The apprentices Tom and Will are stoking the fire, their faces smudged with soot, their chatter about a client's fainting spell fading as the day's work winds down. The shop is quiet, the city's pulse vendors shouting, bells tolling, softening in the late afternoon, and it's time for supper. You gather with the apprentices around a low table, ready to share a meal of stale bread, swapping tales by candlelight, a moment of rest in London's relentless rhythm. The table is small, its wood warped and scratched, set with a clay plate holding a loaf of stale rye bread, its crust hard but fragrant, a wooden bowl of soft cheese, and a clay jug of small beer, their yeasty scent rising in the shop's warm air. You ease yourself onto a wooden stool, its surface worn smooth, the apron's leather, brushing your knees, and adjust your russet wool cap, its faded brim cool against your brow. Tom, his freckled face flushed, slices the bread with a dull knife, its blade scraping softly, while Will, his eyes bright, pours beer into clay cups, their chipped rims catching the candle's flickering glow, the flame casting soft shadows on the shop's blackened walls. You take a piece of bread, its texture rough and chewy, breaking it with a quiet crack, and spread a smear of cheese, its tangy scent sharp against the bread's faint staleness. You smile, imagining explaining this to a modern chef. No takeout, just stale bread and stories. They'd probably order pizza and scroll their phones. You take a bite, the bread tough, but satisfying, its rye flavor mingling with the cheese's creamy tang. A quiet fuel after a day of sharpening razors, mixing salve, sweeping floors, shaving beards and pulling teeth. The apprentices settle beside you, their stools creaking, and Tom starts a tale, his voice low, about a client who swore his toothache came from a witch's curse, only to faint when you pulled the rotten molar, the shop echoing with his groans. You grin the story's absurdity, a spark in the candle-lit calm, and sip the beer, its bitter, watery taste, cool on your tongue, a far cry from the ale in London's taverns, but enough to ease the day's weight. The 17th century is harsh barbers like you, working long hours in shops, thick with filth, where a meal shared with apprentices is a rare pause, a moment to laugh and forget the plague's shadow, though its threat lingers in every client's cough. You chuckle softly, picturing a modern office worker at this table. Team lunch, try bread with plague vibes, you think amused by their catered salads and coffee breaks. You lean back, the stool creaking faintly, and take another bite, the bread's crust crunching, the cheese's tang spreading through your mouth. The candle's glow warming your face, its wax dripping slowly onto the table, a small pool of light in the shop's dimness. Will, wiping crumbs from his chin, counters with a story about a merchant who demanded a shave but fled when he saw the leach pot, claiming it was cursed. The apprentices laughing so hard they spilled their beer. You listen, your voice quiet, letting their tales wash over you, like the candle's soft light, a moment of camaraderie in a trade where every client could bring death. The shop's air is heavy, the scent of wood smoke now mixed with a faint sour note from the leach pot, and you feel a faint ache in your hands from scrubbing instruments, a steady weight, Like the Sahara's salt workers' slabs a world apart, yet kin in their labour's burden. You think of the sailor's tooth, its blackened form in the bowl, and how these stories lighten the shop's grim work, a quiet shield against London's fears. You reach for another piece of bread, its crust rough in your hand, and pass the cheese bowl to Tom, his freckled fingers grabbing it eagerly, the clay clinking softly. The candle flickers, its flame swaying in a faint breeze from the shop's window, and you notice a small moth fluttering near the light, its wings a pale blur, a fleeting visitor like the beetle you saw, sweeping a world apart, yet kin in their small lives, like the sparrows in Edo's squares. You recall the old women's tales of moths as spirits, but you're not one for omens, just a barber. Your mind on the bread and the apprentices' tales. The city's pulse drifts through the window, vendors closing stalls, a dog's bark, the soft toll of a bell, a reminder of London's life even in plague times. You think of the modern world with its break rooms and snacks. Would they trade their meals for this stale bread by candlelight tales of witches and leeches? You laugh quietly, picturing a barista sharing a sandwich, their latte useless in London's grime. Your muscles ache, the day's sharpening, mixing, sweeping, shaving, and tooth-pulling a steady weight. But the bread and stories ease it, a gentle fuel for the hours ahead. You adjust your apron, its leather catching on your shirt, and brush a crumb from your sleeve. The wool rough under your fingers, the faint ink smudge from a past task now gone. The apprentices' voices continue, now debating a client who paid with a bent coin, their laughter soft but warm. You think of the leech salve, its sticky weight, a faint echo on your fingers, and the merchant's shave, its trembling strokes, a distant pulse in your mind. The shop's rhythm is slow, the candles glow a quiet cradle, and you feel London's pulse pulling you toward the next task. The city's clients waiting beyond the alley's quiet haze. Historians still debate whether 17th century London barbers shared meals to bond or survive, but you don't care much for the debate. The bread is eaten, and that's enough to keep you moving. You set your cup down, the clay clinking softly, and prepare to rise the shop's candlelight, fading, ready for the next duty. London's streets humming in the evening's calm. You rise from the low wooden table, the stale rye bread, now eaten, its chewy crust and tangy cheese, a faint warmth in your stomach. The apprentices' tales of cursed teeth and fleeing merchants lingering like the candle's flickering glow in the dim shop. Your patched wool shirt brushes your waist, its coarse fabric tied loosely under the stained leather apron, its weight a quiet reminder of your role as a barber, not just shaving beards, but tending sores in London's plague-shadowed streets. Your worn leather shoes creak on the wooden floor, their thin soles free of the ash you swept earlier, and the hearth's embers glow faintly, their warmth barely touching the shop's air, thick with wood smoke, and the faint sour tang of the leech pot nearby. The apprentices Tom and Will clear the table, their clay cups clinking softly, their chatter fading as they stack, kindling the shop, settling into the late afternoon's hush. A new client, a gaunt weaver with a bandaged arm, waits by the door, his face pale and eyes anxious, needing his plague sores checked. You move toward him, ready to inspect the bandages, dreading the signs of deadly plague, the shop's dim light guiding your careful hands. You gesture to a wooden stool by the table, your voice low and steady, inviting the weaver to sit his tattered russet cloak, smelling of wool and sweat. His bandaged arm held stiffly, his breath shallow, as he eases onto the stool, its wood creaking under his slight frame. You adjust your apron, its leather cool against your shirt, and pull a clean linen cloth from a shelf, its fibers rough but free of stains, draping it over the table to catch any drips. Your movements slow to calm his nerves, though your own pulse quickens, wary of what lies beneath the bandages. The weaver's eyes dart to the leech pot, its wriggling contents a silent threat, and you murmur softly, asking about his trade looms. He says, his voice faint, a distraction to ease his fear, though the plague's shadow looms, it soars a death sentence in London's grimy alleys. You smile, imagining explaining this to a modern nurse. No gloves, just hope and a rag. They'd probably suit up and call hazmat. You kneel beside him, your shoes creaking on the planks, and gently lift his arm, its bandage a strip of linen stained yellow and frayed, smelling faintly of pus, and the herbal salve you applied days ago, its comfrey tang a quiet echo of the mixture you stirred this morning. You unwind the cloth, your fingers steady but cautious, peeling it slowly, the weaver's groan soft but sharp as the bandage sticks to his skin, revealing a cluster of red sores, their edges inflamed but not yet blackened, a small relief in a city where plague marks mean quarantine or death. The 17th century is merciless. Barbers, like you, acting as surgeons, inspecting sores in shops thick with filth, where a wrong diagnosis could doom you, the weaver, or the entire street if plague spreads. You've checked sores before their pus, and pain a routine part of your trade, but each unveiling feels like a gamble, the weaver's fate a mirror to London's suffering. You chuckle softly, picturing a modern doctor facing this. Quarantine. Try a red cross on the door, you think, amused by their sterile rooms and tests. You examine the sores, your eyes sharp in the shop's dim light. The hearth's glow casting faint shadows on the weaver's arm. The sore's redness a warning, but not yet the buboes of plague, their size steady, since his last visit, a quiet hope you cling to, though fear lingers like the leeches wriggle in their pot. You dab the cloth with a fresh mix of salve, its comfrey scent earthy, and press it gently to the sores, the weaver wincing his breath, catching his eyes fixed on the floor, trusting your hands despite the city's dread. The shop's air is heavy, the scent of pus now mixing with wood smoke and the faint soapy note of lye from the basin you used to clean instruments, a reminder of the blood you scrubbed away. The apprentices watch Tom's freckled face pale, Will's eyes wary, their silence a quiet respect for the task's danger, knowing a plague sore could close the shop or worse. You re-wrap the arm with a fresh linen strip, its fibers soft but sturdy, tying it carefully, the knot firm but not tight, ensuring the sores breathe but stay covered, protecting the weaver and yourself from the city's filth. You wipe your hands on the apron, its leather rough, a faint smear of salve joining the stains, and step back, nodding to the weaver. Your voice low, suggesting he return tomorrow, though you dread what the sores might show. The morning light fades, the shop growing dimmer, and you hear a vendor's call outside, Pye's ale, a faint pulse of London's life, even in plague times. You think of the Sahara's salt workers, their hands raw, a world apart, yet kin in their labour's weight, like the Edo's thieves bound by ropes, both facing burdens heavy with risk. Your heart steadies though the day's aches sharpening, mixing, shaving, pulling teeth grumble in your bones, a quiet weight in London's grip. You notice a small moth fluttering near the hearth, its wings a faint blur in the dim light. A fleeting visitor like the beetle you saw earlier, a world apart, yet kin in their small lives, like the dragonflies in Edo's canals. You recall tales of moths as souls, but you're not one for omens. Just a barber, your mind on the weaver, and the saws you dread. The air grows heavy, the scent of salve lingering, and you catch a whiff of grilled fish from the alley, a savoury note in the shop's quiet gloom. You think of the modern world with its hospitals and diagnostics. Would they trade their tools for this checking saws in a sooty shop, plague in every bandage? You laugh quietly, picturing a barista facing a plague saw their latte art useless in London's grime. You remember the sailor's tooth, its blackened form, a faint echo in your mind, and feel the shop's rhythm pulling you toward the next task. The city's clients waiting beyond the alley's haze. Historians still debate whether 17th century London barbers treated sores to heal or merely to delay plague's spread. But you don't care much for the debate. The bandages are checked, and that's enough to keep you moving. You help the weaver rise the shop's dim light steady, ready for the next duty, London's streets humming outside the door. You step back from the weaver, his bandaged arm now re-wrapped the inflamed sores beneath the fresh linen, a quiet warning of plague's shadow. His gaunt frame shuffling out of the shop as he clutches his russet cloak, his pale face fading into the late afternoon's haze. Your patched wool shirt brushes your waist, its coarse fabric tied under the stained leather apron, its weight a quiet reminder of your role as a barber, shaving beards and tending sores in London's disease-haunted streets. Your worn leather shoes creak on the wooden floor, their thin soles free of the ash you swept earlier, and the hearth's embers glow faintly, their warmth barely touching the shop's air, thick with wood smoke and the faint earthy tang of comfrey salve. The apprentices, Tom and Will, are wiping down the table, their soft chatter about the weaver's saws fading as they stack, kindling the shop, settling into a momentary lull. You need to fetch more leeches from a riverbank vendor, a task that pulls you out of the shop, and you step into the alley, ready to tread London's plague-emptied streets, avoiding pestilent doorways, marked with red crosses, the city's eerie quiet guiding your careful steps. You pull the shop's heavy wooden door shut, its scarred surface creaking, and the cool afternoon air rushes over you, carrying the scent of mud and rotting straw from the alley, a sharp contrast to the shop's smoky warmth. You adjust your russet wool cap, its faded brim snug on your head, and wrap a linen scarf around your mouth, its fibers rough but clean, a thin shield against the city's miasma. The foul air blamed for plague's spread. The alley is narrow, its dirt path churned by carts and feet, lined with timbered houses leaning close, their shutters closed, some marked with red crosses painted in warning, their doors nailed shut to quarantine, the sick within a silent signal of death's grip. You walk slowly, your shoes sinking into the mud, their soles sticking faintly each step, deliberate to avoid brushing against doorways where plague could lurk in a single touch. You smile, imagining explaining this to a modern commuter. No subway, just plague and mud. They'd probably wear a hazmat suit and call an Uber. You move through the streets, the alleys winding between houses and shops, their wooden frames dark with soot, the air heavy with the scent of damp earth and the faint sour tang of refuse piled in corners, a breeding ground for the rats you glimpse scuttling in the shadows. The city is quieter than usual, the market's bustle muted the streets, half empty, as plague drives Londoners indoors, their fear a palpable weight, like the silence after a church bell's toll. You pass a shuttered tavern, its sign swaying faintly, and skirt a doorway, with a red cross, its paint fresh and stark. The faint sound of a moan within, sending a chill through you, though you keep your pace steady, your scarf tight, your eyes on the path ahead. The 17th century is brutal barbers like you, navigating a city where plague empties streets. Each errand a gamble, the air itself a potential killer. You chuckle softly, picturing a modern pedestrian in these alleys. Social distancing. Try dodging death's doorstep, you think amused by their masks and sanitizers. You turn a corner, the alley opening to a wider street, its dirt path less churned, though still slick with mud, the faint light of late afternoon casting long shadows from the houses, their gabled roofs looming like silent sentinels. A lone vendor selling herbs from a cart calls softly, his voice hoarse, his eyes wary as you pass, keeping your distance, your scarf muffling your breath. The herb's sharp scent, rosemary, he claims to ward off plague. A fleeting note in the street's grim air. You've walked these streets before countless times, but each journey feels heavier. Now the red crosses, multiplying the city's pulse, a faltering beat, like the Sahara's dunes or Edo's alleys. Worlds apart, yet kin in their quiet dangers, each step a test of nerve. You notice a small sparrow perched on a fence, its chirp faint in the street's silence, a fleeting visitor like the moth in your shop, a world apart, yet kin in their small lives, and you recall tales of sparrows as hope, though you're not one for omens. Just a barber, your mind on the vendor and the leeches you need. You keep moving your shoes, squelching faintly the mud clinging to their soles, and feel a faint ache in your legs from the day's work, sharpening razors, mixing salve, sweeping floors, shaving beards, pulling teeth, checking sores a steady weight, like the fear that grips you at each Red Cross door. The air grows cooler, the breeze stirring your apron, its leather catching on your shirt, and you catch a whiff of burning wood from a distant fire, perhaps a plague house being cleansed, its smoke a grim note in the city's scent. You think of the modern world with its empty streets during lockdowns. Would they trade their safety for this walking plague? Empty alleys, pestilence in every doorway. You laugh quietly, picturing a barista dodging red crosses, their latte art. Useless in London's grime. You remember the weaver's saws, their inflamed edges a faint echo in your mind, and feel the city's rhythm pulling you toward the riverbank. The leech vendor waiting beyond the street's quiet dread. Historians still debate whether 17th century Londoners avoided plague-marked houses out of fear or superstition. But you don't care much for the debate. The streets are empty, and that's enough to keep you moving. You adjust your scarf, its linen snug, and step forward, the alley's shadows deepening, ready for the vendor London's quiet hum, guiding you through the plague's eerie grip. You step through the plague-emptied streets, the Red Cross doorways now behind you, their silent warnings fading as you weave through London's quiet alleys, the linen scarf around your mouth a thin shield against the city's miasma. Your patched wool shirt brushes your waist, its coarse fabric tied under the stained leather apron, its weight a quiet reminder of your role as a barber, tending sores and shaving beards in a city stalked by plague. Your worn leather shoes squelch in the muddy path, their thin soles sticking faintly, and the late afternoon air is cool, carrying the scent of damp earth and rotting refuse, the distant hum of vendors and bells, softened by the street's eerie hush. The riverbank, where a leech vendor waits with his wriggling wares, is near, and you move toward it, your steps careful to avoid the pestilent shadows, the Thames's murky flow a beacon in the city's gloom. You adjust your russet wool cap, its faded brim snug, and prepare to haggle, ready to barter for leeches. By the river's edge, the city's quiet, guiding your cautious path. The riverbank is a narrow strip of mud and gravel, its edge lapped by the Thames' dark, sluggish waves, the air thick with the stench of fish and the river's sour, muddy tang, a sharp contrast to the shop's wood smoke and salve. You spot the vendor, a wiry man in a tattered cloak, his face weathered and eyes sharp, standing by a wooden cart piled with clay jars. Their corks sealed the faint slither of leeches inside a soft, unsettling hum. You approach, your shoes sinking into the mud, its cold grip seeping through the leather, and nod your voice low through the scarf, asking about his stock. Your eyes scanning the jars, wary of their contents and the vendor's cough. A faint rattle that makes you step back. You hold out a small leather pouch, its coins clinking softly, and begin to haggle, offering a few pence for a jar, the vendor's price high, his grin sly as he counters, claiming his leeches are the fattest in London. You smile, imagining explaining this to a modern pharmacist. No supplier, just a guy with slimy jars. They'd probably order online and sanitize everything. You work slowly, your voice steady, pointing to a smaller jar, its clay chipped but sealed, arguing its leeches look thin, a tactic to lower the price, though you know any leech will do in a city where bloodletting is a barber's bread and butter. The vendor laughs, his cough cutting through, and offers a deal, 3 pence for the jar, plus a bundle of rosemary, its sharp scent rising from his cart, a supposed ward against plague, though you doubt its power. The 17th century is desperate, London's barbers relying on leeches to balance humours, their bites a cure for fevers or sores. Though each transaction risks the plague's spread, the vendor's breath or hands a potential vector in a city where death hides in every touch. You've haggled for leeches before their wriggling forms a routine part of your trade. But each barter feels like a dance with danger, the riverbank's muck a mirror to London's decay. You chuckle softly, picturing a modern buyer at this cart. Health inspection. Try dodging a cough, you think, amused by their regulations and receipts. You count out the coins, their copper cool in your palm, and hand them over the vendor's fingers, brushing yours their roughness. A quiet jolt, though you keep your face calm, your scarf tight, your eyes on the jar as he passes it. Its weight heavy, the leeches slither, a faint vibration against the clay. You tuck the jar into your apron's pocket, its bulk pressing against your side, and take the rosemary, its prickly leaves brushing your fingers, their scent sharp but fleeting, a small comfort in the riverbank's grim air. The Thames laps softly, its waves dark and oily, and you notice a small fish darting near the bank, its scales glinting in the fading light, a fleeting visitor like the sparrow you saw in the streets, a world apart, yet kin in their small lives, like the moths in Edo's guardhouse. You recall tales of fish carrying plague in their flesh. But you're not one for superstitions, just a barber, your mind on the leeches and the clients they'll serve. You step back, your shoes squelching in the mud, and feel a faint ache in your legs from the day's work. Sharpening razors, mixing salve, sweeping floors, shaving beards, pulling teeth, checking sores, a steady weight, like the fear that grips you at each plague-marked doorway. Though the vendor's cough lingers, a quiet dread in your chest. The air grows cooler, the breeze stirring your apron, its leather catching on your shirt, and you catch a whiff of burning straw from a distant fire. Perhaps a plague house being cleansed, its smoke a grim note in the riverbank's scent. You think of the modern world with its sterile supplies and delivery vans. Would they trade their safety for this haggling for leeches by a murky river plague in every breath? You laugh quietly, picturing a barista bartering for worms, their latte art useless in London's grime. You remember the weaver's saws, their inflamed edges a faint echo in your mind, and feel the city's rhythm pulling you back to the shop. The leech's weight a new burden in your apron. Historians still debate whether 17th century London barbers bought leeches for healing or profit. But you don't care much for the debate. The jar is yours, and that's enough to keep you moving. You turn from the vendor, the riverbank's mud clinging to your shoes, ready for the shop. London's quiet streets, waiting beyond the Thames's dark flow. You step away from the Thames' murky riverbank, the clay jar of leeches now heavy in your apron's pocket. Their faint slither a quiet weight as you weave back through London's plague-emptied alleys. The vendor's hoarse cough lingering in your mind like a shadow. Your patched wool shirt brushes your waist, its coarse fabric tied under the stained leather apron, and your worn leather shoes squelch on the muddy path, their thin soles caked with riverbank grit. Each step a careful dodge around doorways marked with red crosses. The linen scarf around your mouth muffles your breath, its fibers rough but clean, a thin shield against the city's miasma, and the russet wool cap sits snug on your head, its faded brim damp from the afternoon's mist. The air is cool, carrying the scent of damp earth and burning straw. The city's pulse vendors' calls, distant bells muted in the late afternoon's eerie hush. You reach the shop, its blackened walls a familiar haven, but find Tom, your freckled apprentice, slumped by the hearth, his face flushed and brow slick with sweat, a fever's grip tightening. You kneel beside him, ready to cool his brow, fearing the plague's creeping hold, the shop's dim light guiding your trembling hands. You ease Tom onto a wooden stool, its surface worn smooth. The shop's floor creaking under your shoes, the hearth's embers casting a faint flickering glow across his pale face. His breath shallow and ragged, his eyes half closed with fever's weight. You adjust your apron, its leather cool against your shirt, and fetch a clay bowl of water from the table, its murky contents cool but tinged with the Thames's earthy scent, a trace of the riverbank you just left. You dip a clean linen cloth into the water, its fibers soft but rough, and press it gently to Tom's brow. The coolness drawing a soft groan from him, his freckled cheeks flushed red, a sign that makes your heart quicken, dreading the plague's telltale sores or buboes. You murmur softly, your voice low and steady, telling him to rest, a distraction from the fear clawing at you. Though his fevered skin burns under your touch, a quiet warning in London's plague-haunted air. You smile, imagining explaining this to a modern paramedic. No thermometer, just dread and a rag. They'd probably call an ambulance and glove up. You work slowly, your hands trembling slightly, re-wetting the cloth and pressing it to his brow, the water dripping faintly, its coolness easing his flush. Though his fever persists, his breath a soft wheeze that echoes the weaver's groans from earlier. A sound that tightens your chest. The shop's air is heavy, the scent of wood smoke now mixed with a faint sour note from the leach pot. Its wriggling contents a silent menace on the shelf, a reminder of the bloodletting you might need if Tom's fever worsens. The 17th century is merciless, barbers, like you, acting as physicians in a city where plague fells thousands each, fever a potential death sentence, and apprentices living in your shop are as close as family. Their illness a personal blow in a trade already thick with risk. You've tended fevers before their heat, and fear a routine part of your work, but each touch feels like a gamble. Tom's life a fragile thread in London's grim tapestry. You chuckle softly, picturing a modern nurse in this shop. Quarantine. Try nursing in a plague pit. You think amused by their sterile wards and monitors. You adjust the cloth, folding it to keep it cool, and check Tom's neck, your fingers probing gently, fearing the hard swell of buboes, the plague's deadly mark. But finding only sweat and heat, a small relief that steadies your breath, though the fear lingers like the leeches slither or the red crosses in the streets. Will the older apprentice watches from the corner, his eyes wide, stacking kindling with slow, nervous hands, his silence a quiet dread, knowing a fever could close the shop, or worse, spread to you all. You nod to him, your voice low, asking him to fetch more water, a task to keep him busy. His footsteps fading, as he steps outside, the buckets clink, a faint note in the shop's hush. The shop's walls blackened by soot loom close. The hearth's glow a quiet comfort, and you feel a bead of sweat on your brow caught by the russet cap's brim. The day's work sharpening, mixing, shaving, pulling teeth, checking saws a steady weight like the Sahara's salt, or Ado's ropes, worlds apart, yet kin in their burden. You notice a small beetle scuttling across the floor, its black shell glinting in the hearth's light. A fleeting visitor, like the fish you saw by the riverbank, a world apart, yet kin in their small lives, like the moths in your shop's dim corners. You recall tales of beetles as ill omens, but you're not one for superstitions, just a barber, your mind on Tom and the fever you dread. The air grows heavier, the scent of water and salve mingling, and you catch a whiff of grilled pies from the alley, a savory note in the shop's grim air. You think of the modern world with its hospitals and antivirals. Would they trade their clinics for this, tending a fevered boy in a sooty shop, plague in every breath? You laugh quietly, picturing a barista checking a fever, their latte art useless in London's grime. You remember the weaver's saws, their inflamed edges a faint echo in your mind, And the sailor's tooth, its blackened form, a quiet weight, the shop's rhythm pulling you toward the next task, London's clients waiting beyond the alley's haze. You re-wet the cloth, pressing it to Tom's brow, his grown softer now, his fevered eyes fluttering, and you feel a quiet hope, though the plague's shadow looms a spectre in every flush or wheeze. The shop's light dims the afternoon fading, and you hear a vendor's call, ale bred a faint pulse of the city's life, even in its plague-stricken heart. Your hands steady the cloth's coolness, a small act of care, and you prepare to watch Tom the leech jar, waiting the city's quiet hum urging you forward. Historians still debate whether 17th century London barbers treated apprentices as family or labour, but you don't care much for the debate. Tom's brow is cooled, and that's enough to keep you tending. You adjust the cloth, the shop's dim light steady, ready for the next duty. London's streets waiting beyond the hearth's faint glow. You step back from Tom, the freckled apprentice, now resting on the wooden stool, his fevered brow cooled by the damp linen cloth, his shallow breath softening, though the fear of plague lingers like a shadow in the shop's dim light. His flushed face a quiet worry you push aside. Your patched wool shirt brushes your waist, its coarse fabric tied under the stained leather apron, its weight a quiet reminder of your role as a barber, tending sores and sewing wounds in London's plague-haunted streets. Your worn leather shoes creak on the wooden floor, their soles free of the riverbank's mud, and the hearth's faint embers glow their warmth barely touching the air, heavy with wood smoke and the sour tang of the leech pot nearby. Will the older apprentice returns with a bucket of water, its clink a soft note as he sets it by the table, his eyes wary, avoiding Tom's fevered form. A new client, a carter with a bloodied arm, limps through the door, his cloak torn from a cart's splintered edge, needing a gash stitched. You move to the table, ready to thread a needle and sew the wound, the shop's smoky light guiding your steady hands. You gesture to a wooden chair by the table, its surface scarred from years of use, and the carter eases himself down, his groan deep and rough, his russet cloak falling open to reveal a jagged gash on his forearm, the blood sticky and dark, its coppery scent sharp in the shop's warm air. You adjust your apron, its leather cool and heavy, ensuring it won't catch on your tools, and pull a bone needle from a small wooden box. Its point sharp but smooth threaded, with a length of coarse linen thread, its fibers stiff but strong smelling faintly of lye from the shop's wash. You kneel beside the carter, your shoes soft on the planks, and clean the wound with a linen cloth dipped in the water. Will brought its coolness, drawing a hiss from the man, his greying beard, twitching, his eyes fixed on the needle with a mix of trust and dread. You smile, your voice low and steady, murmuring about the weather, misty, a London staple to distract him, though your heart quickens, wary of infection in a city where every wound could fester into plague. You smile, imagining explaining this to a modern surgeon. No anesthesia, just thread and nerve. They'd probably gown up and call for sutures. You work slowly, your fingers steady as you thread the needle through the carter's skin, the bone piercing softly, the thread pulling tight to close the gash, each stitch a small precise act in the shop's smoky hush, the carter's groans low but sharp, his hand gripping the chair's arm. The wound is clean, no pus or plague sores, a small relief in a trade, where every cut could spell death, and you guide the needle with care, the linen thread tugging gently its coarse texture, catching faintly on the skin's edge, sealing the gash against London's filth. The 17th century is brutal barbers like you, acting as surgeons in shops, thick with disease-stitching wounds, with crude tools where a single slip could turn a gash into a grave. The plague's shadow, ever present in every client's blood. You've stitched wounds before their pain, and risk a routine part of your trade, but each suture feels like a quiet battle. The carter's life, a fragile thread in your hands. You chuckle softly, picturing a modern doctor in this shop. Sterile field. Try a smoky room you think amused by their machines and masks. You tie off the thread, knotting it carefully, the linen firm against the carter's skin, and wipe the wound with a fresh cloth. Its fibers soft, dabbing a smear of comfrey salve, its earthy scent, rising a quiet echo of the mixture you stirred for leeches. A small shield against infection, though nothing can fully guard against plague's grip. The carter exhales his shoulders, easing his eyes, meeting yours with a flicker of relief, though pain lingers in his tightened jaw, his bloodied cloak a testament to the day's toil. The shop's air is heavy, the scent of blood now mixing with wood smoke and the faint soapy note of lye from the basin. You used to clean instruments, a reminder of the tooth you pulled and the sores you checked. Will watches his eyes darting to Tom's fevered form, his kindling forgotten, while Tom's soft groans fade, his cloth still damp on his brow. The shop's rhythm a tense hum in the late afternoon's dim light. You set the needle aside its bone tip, now bloodied, ready to clean later, and wipe your hands on the apron, its leather rough. A faint smear of salve joining the stains, like the mud from the riverbank, or the ink on an Edo doshin's sleeve, worlds apart yet kin in their labour's marks. The carter mumbles, thanks his voice gruff, and you nod, suggesting he keep the wound dry, a faint hope in a city where filth is everywhere, like the red crosses you dodged in the streets. You notice a small moth fluttering near the hearth, its wings a pale blur in the smoky light, a fleeting visitor like the beetle in your shop, a world apart, yet kin in their small lives like the fish by the Thames. You recall tales of moths as ill omens, but you're not one for superstitions. Just a barber, your mind on the carter and the wound now stitched. Your muscles ache, the day's sharpening, mixing, sweeping, shaving, tooth-pulling, saw-checking, and leech-buying a steady weight. But the stitching's rhythm soothes it, a quiet focus in London's chaos. The afternoon fades, the shop's light dimming, and you hear a vendor's call, ale pies a faint pulse of the city's life, even in its plague-stricken heart. You think of the modern world with its operating rooms and antiseptics. Would they trade their clinics for this stitching gashes in a smoky shop plague in every drop? You laugh quietly, picturing a barista threading a needle, their latte art useless in London's grime. You remember Tom's fever, its heat a faint echo in your mind, and the sailor's tooth, its blackened form, a quiet weight. The shop's rhythm pulling you toward the next task, London's clients waiting beyond the alley's haze. Historians still debate whether 17th century London barbers stitched wounds to save lives or meet guild demands. But you don't care much for the debate. The gash is sewn, and that's enough to keep you moving. You help the carter rise the shop's dim light steady, ready for the next duty, London's streets, humming outside the door. You step back from the carter, his stitched arm now wrapped in fresh linen, the gash sealed against London's filth, his russet cloak swaying as he limps out of the shop, his gruff thanks fading into the late afternoon's haze. Your patched wool shirt brushes your waist, its coarse fabric tied under the stained leather apron, its weight a quiet reminder of your role as a barber, stitching wounds and tending fevers in a city gripped by plague. Your worn leather shoes creak on the wooden floor, their soles free of the riverbank's mud, and the hearth's faint embers glow, their warmth barely touching the shop's air, heavy with wood smoke and the faint earthy tang of comfrey salve. Tom, the fevered apprentice, rests on a stool, his brow still damp but cooler, while Will wipes down the table, his eyes darting nervously to the leech pot, its wriggling contents a silent threat. The shop's pile of contaminated cloths bloodied from the carter's gash. The sailor's tooth, the weaver's saws sits in a corner, a danger that must be burned to keep plague at bay. You gather the rags ready to burn them in the courtyard, smoke rising in the darkening air, the shop's quiet, guiding your careful steps. You scoop the cloths into a wicker basket, their linen heavy with dried blood, and pus the coppery scent sharp and sour mingling with the shop's wood smoke and the faint soapy note of lye from the basin you used to clean instruments. You adjust your russet wool cap, its faded brim snug, and pull the linen scarf tighter around your mouth, its fibers rough but clean a shield against the rag's pestilent threat, though no cloth can fully guard against the plague's invisible grip. You carry the basket to the shop's back door, its wooden frame warped and creaking as you push it open, stepping into a small courtyard, its dirt packed hard surrounded by timbered walls and a single gnarled apple tree, its bare branches stark against the evening sky. You set the basket by a stone fire pit, its blackened rim cold but ready, and fetch a bundle of kindling from a pile, its twigs dry and snapping softly in your hands. You smile, imagining explaining this to a modern biohazard team. No incinerator, just a pit and prayers. They'd probably suit up and call for backup. You work slowly, your hands steady as you stack the kindling in the pit, its wood rough under your fingers, and strike a flint, the spark flaring briefly, catching the twigs with a soft crackle, their flames small but growing, casting a flickering glow across the courtyard's dirt. You tip the basket, the cloths tumbling into the fire, their bloodied fibers hissing as they burn, the smoke rising in thick grey curls, its acrid scent sharp and bitter, a mix of charred linen and the plague's grim residue stinging your eyes, despite the scarf's cover. The 17th century is ruthless, London's barbers burning contaminated rags to halt plague's spread, each flame, a desperate act in a city where a single cloth could doom a household. The red crosses on doors, a constant reminder of death's reach. You've burned rags before their smoke, a routine part of your trade, but each fire feels like a quiet ritual, a plea to keep your shop safe, though the plague's shadow looms like the leech's slither or Tom's fevered brow. You chuckle softly, picturing a modern hazmat worker at this pit. Disposal, try burning plague, rags you think amused by their sealed bins and protocols. You feed the fire more cloths, their flames leaping higher, the smoke swirling upward, catching in the apple tree's branches, its bark glistening faintly in the firelight. The courtyard's air growing warmer, the smoke's bite forcing you to step back, your shoes soft on the dirt. Will appears at the door, his eyes wide, holding a bucket of water in case the flames spread his silence, a quiet dread, knowing the rag's danger, like the sores you checked, or the streets you walked, each task heavy with plague's risk. The shop's walls loom close, their timber dark with soot, and you hear a distant moan from the alley, perhaps a plague victim or a drunk, a sound that tightens your chest though you focus on the fire, its crackle a steady rhythm in the evening's hush. Your muscles ache, the day's sharpening, mixing, sweeping, shaving tooth, pulling, saw-checking, leech-buying, and stitching a steady weight like the Sahara's salt, or Erdo's ropes worlds apart, yet kin in their labour's burden. You notice a small bat flitting above the courtyard, its wings a faint blur in the dusk. A fleeting visitor, like the moth in your shop, a world apart, yet kin in their small lives, like the fish by the Thames. You recall tales of bats as plague carriers, but you're not one for superstitions, just a barber, your mind on the rags, and the fire consuming them. The air grows heavier, the smoke's acrid tang thickening, and you catch a whiff of grilled pies from the alley, a savoury note in the courtyard's grim scent, a reminder of London's life even in its plague-stricken heart. You think of the modern world with its biohazard protocols and incinerators. Would they trade their safety for this burning bloody rags in a dark courtyard, plague in every wisp? You laugh quietly, picturing a barista tending a plague fire, their latte art useless in London's grime. You remember Tom's fever, its heat a faint echo in your mind, and the carter's gash, its stitches, a quiet weight, the shop's rhythm pulling you toward the next task. London's clients waiting beyond the courtyard's haze. You add the last cloth, its flames dying down, the smoke thinning, the pit's embers glowing red, their heat a quiet end to the rag's threat, though the plague's shadow lingers a spectre in every breath. The courtyard's darkness deepens, the apple tree's branches swaying faintly, and you hear a vendor's call, ale bread, a faint pulse of the city's life, urging you back to the shop, the fire's work done, but its smoke still curling in your lungs. Historians still debate whether 17th century London barbers burned rags to stop plague or appease fear. But you don't care much for the debate. The cloths are ash, and that's enough to keep you moving. You turn from the pit, the courtyard's smoke fading, ready for the shop, London's quiet streets, waiting beyond the fire's dying glow. You step back into the shop from the courtyard, the acrid smoke of burned rags still clinging to your patched wool shirt, its coarse fabric tied under the stained leather apron, the fire's bitter tang fading as you close the warped wooden door behind you. Your worn leather shoes creak on the wooden floor, their soles dusted with courtyard ash, and the hearth's embers glow faintly, their warmth barely touching the shop's air, heavy with wood smoke and the faint sour scent of the leach pot nearby. Tom, the fevered apprentice, rests on a stool, his brow cooler but still flushed, while Will stokes the fire, his kindling clinking softly his eyes, avoiding the leech jar you bought from the riverbank vendor, its contents a quiet menace. The shop is settling into the early evening's hush, the city's pulse vendors' calls, distant bells softening outside, but you need herbs for Tom's fever, a task that pulls you to the market. You leave the shop ready to linger by a bustling stall, listening to gossip about plague rumours, the city's twilight, guiding your steps through London's wary streets. You pull the linen scarf tighter around your mouth, its fibres rough but clean a shield against the city's miasma, and adjust your russet wool cap, its faded brim snug as you step into the alley, its muddy path slick under your shoes, the air cool and thick with the scent of rotting straw and grilled fish from a nearby vendor. The market is a short walk, its stalls clustered in a small square, their wooden frames draped with canvas, the air alive with the hum of trade merchants shouting coins, clinking a dog, barking though quieter now, the plague's fear thinning the crowds. You reach a stall selling herbs, its table piled with bundles of rosemary, thyme and dried lavender, their sharp, earthy scents cutting through the square's muddy tang, a promise of healing in a city gripped by death. You pause by the stall, your apron swaying faintly, and nod to the vendor, a stout woman in a patched cloak, her hands deft as she ties rosemary sprigs, her eyes wary but sharp, watching the crowd for thieves or plague signs. You smile, imagining explaining this to a modern gossip blogger. No group chat, just plague talk and herbs. They'd probably post a tweet and call it news. You linger, your shoes steady on the packed dirt, and ask about her time, a pretext to stay and listen, your ears catching the low buzz of gossip from nearby townsfolk. Two merchants in russet cloaks, a woman with a wicker basket, an old man with a cane. Their voices hushed but urgent, trading tales of plagues spread. The woman speaks first, her voice sharp, telling of a family on Cheapside, their door marked with a red cross after a child's fever turned to sores, the house now silent, its shutters nailed shut. You lean closer, your cap's brim shading your eyes, and feel the scarf's linen against your lips, the vendor's thyme bundle in your hand, its prickly leaves brushing your fingers, a quiet anchor as the gossip swirls, each word a weight in London's plague-heavy air. The 17th century is grim, barbers like you hearing rumours in markets, where gossip spreads faster than plague, shaping fears and fates in a city where a single saw can empty a street. You chuckle softly, picturing a modern news anchor at this stall. Breaking news. Try whispers of death, you think, amused by their microphones and headlines. You shift your weight, the mud sticking to your shoes, and catch the old man's tale, his cane tapping the dirt as he speaks of a tavern keeper who fled to the countryside only to find his family dead of plague, their sores hidden until too late, the crowd murmuring, their eyes darting to shadowed alleys as if plague might lurk there. The merchants add their own story, one whispering of a barber, another shop, not yours, who caught plague from a client's blood. His shop now boarded his apprentices, gone a tale that tightens your chest. Though you keep your face calm, your hands still, the time's scent grounding you. You've heard gossip before, its rumours, a routine part of your trade, but each tale feels heavier now. The plague's grip tightening like the fever on Tom's brow, or the sores you checked, each a thread in London's grim tapestry. A world apart, yet kin to the Sahara's salt, or Edo's thieves bound by burdens that weigh the soul. You offer a copper coin for the time, its metal cool in your palm, and the vendor nods her hands quick as she takes it, her eyes scanning you, perhaps wondering if you carry plague's mark like the weaver's sores, or the sailor's tooth, a quiet suspicion in every glance. You tuck the thyme into your apron, its bulk light beside the leech jar, and linger the gossip pulling you in the woman, now telling of a church where prayers failed to stop plague. Its pews empty, its bell silent, the old man muttering about cursed air. Their voices a low hum against the market's fading bustle. Vendors packing a cart, creaking, a child's laugh cut short. You notice a small sparrow perched on a stall's edge, its chirp faint in the square's clamour. A fleeting visitor like the bat in the courtyard, a world apart, yet kin in their small lives, like the moths in your shop, and you recall tales of sparrows as hope, though you're not one for omens, just a barber, your mind on the gossip and the plague it names. Your muscles ache, the day's sharpening, mixing, sweeping, shaving, tooth-pulling, saw-checking, leech-buying, stitching, and rag-burning a steady weight. But the gossip's rhythm soothes it, a quiet distraction in London's dread. The air grows cooler, the breeze stirring your apron, its leather catching on your shirt, and you catch a whiff of ale from a nearby tavern, a yeasty note in the square's earthy scent, a reminder of the city's life even in its plague-stricken heart. You think of the modern world with its news feeds and alerts. Would they trade their screens for this? Listening to plague rumors by a market stall, death in every word, you laugh quietly, picturing a barista scrolling plague, tweets their latte art useless in London's grime. You remember Tom's fever, its heat a faint echo in your mind, and the carter's gash, its stitches, a quiet weight, the shop's rhythm pulling you toward the next task. London's clients waiting beyond the market's fading light. Historians still debate whether 17th century London gossip spread truth or panic, but you don't care much for the debate. The rumors are heard, and that's enough to keep you lingering. You step back from the stall, the time secure in your apron, ready for the shop. London's quiet streets, waiting beyond the market's hum. You step away from the herb stall, the bundle of thyme now tucked in your apron's pocket beside the leech jar, its prickly scent a faint comfort as you weave back through London's quiet streets, the market's gossip about plague-soaked houses and cursed taverns lingering like the evening's chill. Your patched wool shirt brushes your waist, its coarse fabric tied under the stained leather apron, its weight a quiet reminder of your role as a barber, stitching wounds and tending fevers in a city haunted by plague. Your worn leather shoes squelch on the muddy path, their soles caked with market dirt, and the linen scarf around your mouth muffles your breath, its fibers rough but clean, a shield against the city's miasma. The russet wool cap sits snug on your head, its faded brim damp from the mist, and the evening air is cool, carrying the scent of ale and burning wood. The city's pulse vendor's calls a distant bell, fading into the dusk's hush. Back at the shop, you notice a tear in your apron, its leather frayed from the day's work, and you settle by the hearth ready to mend it. Stitching by flickering firelight, the shop's quiet, guiding your careful hands. You ease yourself onto a low wooden stool by the hearth, its surface worn smooth, the shop's blackened walls glowing faintly in the fire's soft light, the air heavy with wood smoke and the faint sour tang of the leech pot, its wriggling contents silent on the shelf. Tom, the fevered apprentice, rests on a pallet in the corner, his brow cooler but still flushed, his breath slow, while Will sweeps the floor, his broom's soft rustle a quiet rhythm, his eyes avoiding Tom's form, wary of the plague's shadow. You untie the apron, its leather stiff and heavy, stained with blood salve and soot, and lay it across your lap, the tear a jagged rip near the hem, exposing the wool shirt beneath a flaw that could catch on tools or harbour plague's filth. You fetch a bone needle and a coil of coarse linen thread from a wooden box, their weight familiar, like the needle you used to stitch the carter's gash. The threads lie scent, faint but sharp, a quiet echo of the shop's grim work. You smile, imagining explaining this to a modern tailor. No sewing machine, just leather and luck. They'd probably grab a kit and call it quaint. You work slowly, your fingers steady as you thread the needle, its bone tip glinting in the firelight, and pierce the leather, the thread pulling through with a soft tug. Each stitch closing the tear, mending the apron's worn hide, a small act of order in a trade thick with chaos. The leather is tough, its surface cracked from years of use, and you push the needle carefully, avoiding a prick, knowing a cut could fester in London's plague-ridden air, a risk you've faced with every shave or surgery. The 17th century is unforgiving. Barbers, like you, mending their own gear in shops heavy with disease, where a torn apron could mean a blade's slip or a client's distrust, each stitch a quiet defense against the city's decay. You've mended leather before it stitches, a routine part of your trade, but each repair feels like a small stand against the plague's creep, like burning rags or cooling Tom's fever, a world apart, yet kin to the Sahara's salt or Edo's ropes bound by labour's weight. You chuckle softly, picturing a modern repair shop at this hearth. Quick fix, try stitching plague stains, you think, amused by their glue guns and patches. You pull the thread tight, the stitch firm, and move to the next. The needle's soft scrape blending with the hearth's crackle. The fire's warmth brushing your face, its embers glowing red, casting shadows on the apron stains, a map of your day's work. Blood from the carter's gash salve, from the weaver's saw's soot, from the courtyard's fire. The shop's air is heavy, the scent of wood smoke now mixed with a faint sour note from Tom's palate. His fevered sweat a quiet worry, though his breaths are steadier, a small relief in the evening's hush. Will pauses, his sweeping his eyes darting to the leech jar, and mutters about a client who screamed during a boil lancing. His voice low, a spark of humour that eases the shop's tension. Though the plague's shadow lingers, like the gossip you heard or the red crosses in the streets. You nod, your voice soft, encouraging him to keep sweeping, your focus on the needle, its thread weaving through the leather, closing the tear stitch by stitch. You tie off the thread, knotting it carefully, the linen firm against the leather, and test the repair, tugging gently the apron, holding strong ready for another day of shaves and surgeries. Though the stains remain a quiet record of your trade, like the saws you checked, or the tooth you pulled. You set the needle aside, its bone tip now dulled, and wipe your hands on the shirt. Its wool rough, a faint ache in your fingers from the day's sharpening, mixing, sweeping, shaving tooth pulling, saw checking, leech buying, stitching, and rag burning, a steady weight, like the fear that grips you at Tom's fever, or the market's rumours. You notice a small beetle scuttling across the floor, its black shell glinting in the firelight, a fleeting visitor like the sparrow in the market, a world apart, yet kin in their small lives like the bats in the courtyard. And you recall tales of beetles as ill omens. Though you're not one for superstitions, just a barber, your mind on the apron and the work it shields. The evening deepens, the shop's light dimming, and you hear a vendor's call. Pye's Ale, a faint pulse of London's life, even in its plague-stricken heart. The air grows cooler, the breeze slipping through the shop's window, its cloudy panes rattling faintly, and you catch a whiff of burning straw from a distant fire, a grim note in the shop's smoky scent. You think of the modern world with its repair shops and disposable gear. Would they trade their tools for this stitching leather by firelight plague in every thread? You laugh quietly, picturing a barista mending an apron, their latte art useless in London's grime. You remember the weaver's saws, their inflamed edges, a faint echo in your mind. And Tom's fever, its heat, a quiet weight, the shop's rhythm pulling you toward the next task. London's clients waiting beyond the hearth's fading glow. Historians still debate whether 17th century London barbers mended gear for practicality or pride, but you don't care much for the debate. The apron is repaired, and that's enough to keep you moving. You rise from the stool, the fire's glow fading, ready for the next duty. London's quiet streets, waiting beyond the shop's dim hush. You rise from the wooden stool, the mended leather apron now tied snugly around your waist, its fresh stitches firm against the day's stains, the bone needle resting in its wooden box, a quiet testament to your careful work in the shop's dim light. Your patched wool shirt brushes your waist, its coarse fabric warm under the apron's weight, a quiet reminder of your role as a barber stitching wounds and burning rags in London's plague-haunted streets. Your worn leather shoes creak on the wooden floor, their soles dusted with faint ash from the hearth, its embers glowing softly, their warmth fading into the shop's air, heavy with wood smoke and the faint sour tang of the leach pot nearby. Tom, the fevered apprentice, sleeps on his pallet, his brow cooler but still flushed, while Will sweeps the last of the floor's grit. His brooms rustle a soft hum, his eyes avoiding the leach jar, its wriggling contents a silent menace. The shop is quiet, the city's pulse vendors calls a distant bell, muffled in the evening's hush, and you feel a need for solace after a day of plague's wait. You move to a small altar in the shop's corner, ready to kneel and pray, seeking protection from the plague's creeping shadow, the firelight guiding your weary steps. The altar is a modest wooden shelf, its surface polished by years of touch, tucked against the shop's blackened wall, holding a single tallow candle, a chipped clay cup of water, and a small wooden cross, its grain worn smooth, a humble shrine in a city where death stalks every alley. You kneel on the floor, the planks cool and hard under your knees, and adjust your russet wool cap, setting it beside you, its faded brim soft in the firelight, your scarf loosened around your neck, its linen warm from your breath. You light the candle, its wick flaring softly, the tallow's greasy scent rising a faint waxy note mingling with the shop's wood smoke and the leach pot's sour tang, the flame casting a golden glow across the cross, its light a quiet beacon in the evening's dimness. You bow your head, your hands clasp the calluses from razors and needles rough against your skin, and murmur a prayer, your voice low and steady, asking for protection for Tom, for Will, for yourself, from the plague's relentless grip. You smile, imagining explaining this to a modern therapist. No mindfulness app, just a candle and dread. They'd probably suggest yoga and call it a day. You pray slowly, your words soft, a familiar litany from childhood, their rhythm a quiet comfort, each plea a shield against the fear that clings to you like the weaver's saws, the carter's gash or the market's plague rumours, each a weight in London's grim air. The shop's silence wraps around you, broken only by the candle's faint hiss, and Will's broom its rustle pausing as he glances at you, his eyes respectful, knowing prayer is a barber's refuge in a trade thick with death. The 17th century is brutal, London's barbers facing plague's shadow daily. Their shops a crossroads of healing and horror, where prayers are as vital as leeches, or razors a plea to outlast the red crosses multiplying on doors. You've prayed here before countless times, but each moment feels raw, a quiet stand against the city's decay, like mending your apron or burning rags a world apart, yet kin to the Sahara's salt or Edo's ropes bound by labours that test the soul. You chuckle softly, picturing a modern chaplain in this shop. Counselling. Try begging God for mercy, you think amused by their offices and calm. You lift your eyes, the candle's flame swaying faintly, its light painting the cross in soft golds, and feel a bead of sweat on your brow, caught by the shirt's frayed collar. The shop's warmth a quiet contrast to the evening's chill seeping through the window's cloudy panes. Tom stirs on his pallet, his breath steadier, a small relief that eases your chest, though the plague's shadow lingers like the smoke from the courtyard's fire or the leeches slither in their jar. You dip your fingers in the clay cup, its water cool and earthy, and trace a cross on your forehead, the gesture a quiet ritual, its dampness grounding you, a moment of peace in a day heavy with sharpening, mixing, sweeping shaving tooth, pulling saw-checking, leech-buying, stitching, and burning rags. The shop's walls blackened by soot loom close, and you hear a distant cry from the alley, a drunk perhaps, or a plague victim, a sound that pricks your heart though you focus on the prayer, its words a quiet anchor. You notice a small spider weaving a web above the altar, its delicate threads glinting in the candlelight, a fleeting craftsman like the beetle in your shop, or the sparrow in the market, a world apart, yet kin in their small lives like the bats in the courtyard. You recall tales of spiders as guardians, but you're not one for omens, just a barber, your mind on the prayer and the plague you dread. The air grows heavier, the scent of tallow and wood smoke thickening, and you catch a whiff of ale from a passing vendor, a yeasty note in the shop's grim air, a reminder of London's life even in its plague-stricken heart. You think of the modern world with its churches and therapists. Would they trade their sanctuaries for this praying at a crude altar plague in every breath? You laugh quietly, picturing a barista lighting a candle, their latte art useless in London's grime. You remember Tom's fever, its heat a faint echo in your mind, and the carter's gash, its stitches, a quiet weight, the shop's rhythm pulling you toward the next task. London's clients waiting beyond the firelight's glow. You finish the prayer, your voice fading into the shop's silence, and blow out the candle, its smoke curling upward. The cross now dim but steady, a quiet promise in the evening's hush. Your knees ache from kneeling, the day's labour's a steady weight, but the prayer's calm soothes it, a gentle fuel for the hours ahead. You rise, the shop's dim light steady, ready for the next duty, London's quiet streets, waiting beyond the hearth's fading warmth. Historians still debate whether 17th century Londoners prayed to fend off plague or seek solace. But you don't care much for the debate. The prayer is done, and that's enough to keep you moving. You adjust your apron, its leather snug, and step toward the table, the shop's quiet hum urging you forward. London's twilight calling beyond the door. You step away from the small altar. The tallow candle's smoke, now a faint curl in the shop's dim air. The wooden cross, a quiet shadow on the shelf. Its prayer for protection from plague, lingering like a soft echo in your mind. Your patched wool shirt brushes your waist, its coarse fabric tied under the mended leather apron, its fresh stitches a quiet testament to your evening's work, a shield for tomorrow's tasks in London's disease-haunted streets. Your worn leather shoes creak on the wooden floor, their soles dusted with faint ash from the hearth, its embers barely glowing, their warmth lost in the shop's cool air, heavy with wood smoke and the faint sour tang of the leach pot nearby. Tom, the fevered apprentice, sleeps on his pallet, his brow cooler, but still flushed, while Will stacks kindling by the hearth, his movements slow, his eyes heavy from the day's labor, the broom resting in its corner. The shop is still the city's pulse, vendors calls a distant bell, muted in the evening's deepening hush, and it's time to tally the day's earnings, a meager collection of coins from shaves and surgeries. You move to a low wooden table, ready to count coins clinking in the quiet shop, the firelight guiding your careful hands. You ease yourself onto a wooden stool, its surface worn smooth, the apron's leather brushing your knees, and adjust your russet wool cap, setting it beside you, its faded brim soft in the hearth's faint glow. The table holds a small leather pouch, its drawstring loose, filled with the day's coins, pence from the merchant's shave, the sailor's tooth, pulling the carter's stitches, and the weaver's saw-checking each payment a small victory in a city where plague thins purses and lives. You untie the pouch, its leather cool and cracked, and tip the coins onto the table, their copper and silver glinting faintly, a soft clink breaking the shop's silence, the sound sharp but soothing, like the needle's scrape when you mended your apron. You spread them with your fingers, their metal cold, and worn some bent, others scratched, each one a story of your day's toil. You smile, imagining explaining this to a modern cashier. No card reader, just plague coins and hope. They'd probably swipe an app and sanitize their hands. You work slowly, your fingers steady as you count, stacking the coins in small piles. 3 pence here, a halfpenny there, a single shilling shining like a rare jewel, its silver, a quiet promise of bread or ale tomorrow. The hearth's embers flicker, casting soft shadows across the coins, their glow a quiet companion in the shop's dimness, the air heavy with the scent of wood smoke and a faint earthy note from the time bundle in your apron, a reminder of the market's gossip about plague-soaked houses. The 17th century is harsh, London's barbers scraping by on meagre earnings, their shops a crossroads of survival and risk, where coins are hard won, each one weighed against the plague's ever-present threat, a shadow that haunts every client's payment like the sores you checked or Tom's fevered brow. You've counted coins before, their clinks a routine part of your trade, but each tally feels like a small reckoning, a measure of your day's labor in a city where survival is no guarantee. You chuckle softly, picturing a modern accountant at this table. Spreadsheets, try coins in a plague shop. You think amused by their calculators and ledgers. You pause your fingers brushing a bent penny, its edge worn smooth perhaps from the carter's rough hand, and count it twice, ensuring no mistake, the pile growing slowly. Though it's barely enough for the shop's needs, bread herbs a new candle for the altar. Will glances over his kindling done and mutters about a client who paid with a fish instead of coin. His voice low, a spark of humour that eases the shop's tension, though his eyes dart to Tom, whose soft breaths fill the silence, a quiet relief in the evening's hush. You nod your voice soft, encouraging him to rest your focus on the coins. Their cold weight a quiet anchor, a moment of order in a day, heavy with sharpening, mixing, sweeping shaving tooth, pulling saw checking, leech buying, stitching, burning rags, and praying. The shop's walls, blackened by soot, loom close, and you hear a distant cry from the alley, a drunk or a plague victim. A sound that pricks your heart, though you keep counting the coins clink, a steady rhythm. You notice a small moth fluttering near the hearth, its wings a pale blur in the firelight. A fleeting visitor like the spider by your altar, or the sparrow in the market, a world apart, yet kin in their small lives like the bats in the courtyard. You recall tales of moths as ill omens, but you're not one for superstitions, just a barber your mind on the coins and the survival they buy. The air grows cooler, the breeze slipping through the shop's window, its cloudy panes rattling faintly, and you catch a whiff of burning straw from a distant fire. A grim note in the shop's smoky scent, a reminder of the plague houses you dodged in the streets. You think of the modern world with its banks and digital wallets. Would they trade their systems for this counting, plague-touched coins in a sooty shop? Death in every clink, you laugh quietly, picturing a barista tallying cash, their latte art useless in London's grime. You remember Tom's fever, its heat a faint echo in your mind, and the weaver's saws, their inflamed edges a quiet weight. The shop's rhythm pulling you toward the next task, London's clients waiting beyond the firelight's glow. You finish counting the coins, stacked neatly, their total meager, but enough a small shield against tomorrow's needs, though the plague's shadow looms like the leech's slither or the market's rumours. You scoop them back into the pouch, its drawstring tightening with a soft tug, and set it in a wooden box under the table. Its lid creaking faintly, a quiet end to the day's tally. Your muscles ache, the day's labour's a steady weight, but the counting's rhythm soothes it, a gentle pause in London's chaos. The evening deepens, the shop's light fading, and you hear a vendor's call, bread ale, a faint pulse of the city's life, urging you toward rest, the shop's quiet hum, a cradle for the night ahead. Historians still debate whether 17th century London barbers hoarded coins for survival or guild dues, but you don't care much for the debate. The coins are counted, and that's enough to keep you moving. You rise from the table, the fire's glow dimming, ready for the next duty, London's quiet streets, waiting beyond the shop's silent hush. You rise from the low wooden table, the leather pouch of counted coins now tucked in its wooden box, their meagre clinks a faint echo of the day's labour, a small shield against tomorrow's needs in London's plague-shadowed streets. Your patched wool shirt brushes your waist, its coarse fabric tied under the mended leather apron, its fresh stitches a quiet testament to your evening's work, a guard for the shop's grim tasks. Your worn leather shoes creak on the wooden floor, their soles dusted with ash from the hearth, its embers glowing faintly, their warmth barely touching the shop's cool air, heavy with wood smoke and the faint sour tang of the leach pot nearby. Tom, the fevered apprentice, sleeps on his pallet, his brow cooler, but still flushed, his breaths soft, while Will stacks the last of the kindling. His eyes heavy, the broom resting in its corner, its bristles worn from the day's sweeping. The shop is still the city's pulse vendor's calls, a distant bell fading into the night's deepening hush, and you're weary, the day's weight pulling you to rest. You move to your straw pallet in the loft, ready to lie by the dying fire's glow. London's night sounds lulling you to sleep, the shop's quiet, a gentle cradle. You climb the creaky ladder to the loft, its wooden rungs worn smooth, the shop's dim light fading below the hearth's embers, a faint beacon in the darkness, their soft crackle blending with the rustle of straw as you settle onto your pallet, its fibers pricking faintly through your wool shirt, a familiar texture after a day of razors and needles. You untie the apron, its leather heavy with stains, blood salve soot, and lay it beside you, its weight a quiet record of your work, like the coins you counted or the rags you burned. You loosen your russet wool cap, setting it near the pallet, its faded brim soft in the firelight's glow, and pull your shirt over your chest, its coarse weave a makeshift blanket against the night's chill, the loft's air cool and tinged with the scent of damp wood and the faint smoky tang of the hearth below. You lie back, the pallet crinkling under your weight, the straw moulding to your body, a gentle cradle in the shop's silence. The city's sounds, crickets, a shutter's creak, a dog's distant bark drifting through the loft's gaps, a quiet lullaby in London's plague-heavy night. You smile, imagining explaining this to a modern worker. No memory foam, just straw and plague fears. They'd probably grab a pillow and a sleep app. You take a deep breath, the air cool and smoky, and feel the pallet's texture under your back. Its straw, a quiet comfort, like the prayer you offered at the altar, a small shield against the day's burdens, sharpening razors, mixing salve, sweeping floors, shaving beards, pulling teeth, checking sores, buying leeches, stitching gashes, burning rags and counting coins. Your muscles ache, the day's labor's a steady weight, but the fire's dying glow soothes it, its embers pulsing softly, casting faint shadows on the loft's slanted ceiling, their blackened beams, a silent witness to your trade's grim rhythm. Tom's soft breaths drift from below, a quiet hope that his fever won't worsen, though the plague's shadow lingers like the weaver's sores, or the market's gossip, each a thread in London's dark tapestry, a world apart, yet kin to the Sahara's salt, or Edo's ropes bound by labours that grind the soul. You chuckle softly, picturing a modern night owl in this loft. Sleep aid. Try dodging the Black Death, you think, amused by their white noise machines and chamomile tea. You shift on the pallet, the straw rustling faintly, and feel a small pebble caught in your shirt's hem, likely from the market's muddy path. A fleeting traveller in your rest, like the beetle you saw or the moth by the altar, a world apart yet kin in their small lives, like the sparrows in London's squares. You flick it away, the wool ruff under your fingers, and let your eyes drift to the fire's embers, their glow blurring a soft pulse in the loft's dimness, like the candle's flame you lit to pray a quiet echo of hope in a city where death waits in every alley. The shop's silence wraps around you, broken only by Will's soft snores below, and the city's night sounds, crickets, shutters, a distant cry, a gentle tide pulling you toward sleep. The loft's beams, a quiet shield against London's plague-heavy air. You think of the carter's gash, its stitches, and Tom's fever, their weights fading, like the embers a small reprieve in the day's endless toil. You notice a faint star through a gap in the shutters, its light piercing the night, a fleeting beacon like the fish by the Thames or the bat in the courtyard, a world apart yet kin in their quiet presence. And you recall tales of stars as guides, though you're not one for omens, just a barber, your mind on the palette, and the rest it offers. The air grows cooler, the breeze slipping through the loft, its chill brushing your shirt, and you pull it tighter. The wools weave a quiet comfort like the prayer's calm or the coin's clink, small anchors in a city adrift in plague. You think of the modern world with its soft beds and quiet rooms. Would they trade their comfort for this, a straw pallet, a dying fire, and a city where every breath could be your last? You laugh quietly, picturing a barista tossing on a cot, their latte art useless in London's grime. You remember the leech jar, its slither a faint echo in your mind, and the shop's rhythm pulling you toward sleep. London's night a quiet hum beyond the loft's still air. Your breath slows each inhale deep and soft, the pallet's straw a gentle cradle, the fire's embers a fading warmth. London's sounds a soft lullaby. Crickets, shutters, a bell's faint toll blending into a quiet tide, carrying you toward rest, the day's labors, a distant pulse, ready for tomorrow's tasks, whatever they may be. You lie on the straw pallet, London's night sounds weaving a gentle lullaby, the dying fire's embers casting faint golden threads across your patched wool shirt. Its coarse folds a quiet embrace in the loft's cool hush. The leather apron rests beside you, its mended stitches still the russet cap, a soft shadow in the fading glow, the shop's blackened beams holding the city's silence. The air is cool, tinged with wood smoke and damp wood, each breath pulling you deeper into rest. The pallet straw crinkling softly, a tender cradle under your weary frame. You think of Tom's fevered brow, the weaver's saws, the carter's gash, their weights fading like the embers ripples in the Thames' dark flow. The city's hum, crickets, a shutter's creak, a distant bell rocks you gently, the plague's shadow, a faint whisper held at bay by the loft's quiet. Your hands rough from razors and needles, relax the ache of sharpening, stitching and praying, melting into the straw the fire's last spark, a fleeting star. Let the night carry you, let the shop's stillness hold you, let London's pulse sing you to sleep. You're a barber, but now you're just you resting, drifting, dreaming under the city's endless sky, the stars unseen, but felt their light a whisper of tomorrow's work. Thank you for joining this quiet journey through London's plague-shadowed streets. Rest well by the fire's glow. Sweet dreams.